All right, I've turned a blind eye since you've been helping the village. But what in the infinite hells are you doing? The elder dryad demanded, eyeing the lot of them suspiciously. Despite the prior conflict, Ben went back to using the more cheer-filled attitude as he spoke to her. Ah, Hentath, nice to see you. Any thoughts on letting me fix up your home a little? Maybe work on improving your enchantments. She was his only holdout, and even if he'd already gotten his quest complete, he didn't want to leave things unfinished, especially when there was a chance her house could have some of the same issues with rot and structural damage he'd seen in the others. She turned her nose up at the offer though, instead focusing on the boulder they brought with them. You can't just fly something like that through town. You might hurt someone or damage our crops. Well, I'm pretty sure we could have with the logs too. But she's not wrong. You're right. I'm sorry I didn't consult you first, he told her, bowing his head as he did. She didn't expect things to go that easily and seemed taken off guard. Well, good. As long as you understand, then do what you need to with it out of the village. I can't do that, sorry. I made an agreement with your goddess a little while ago, so I need to do as I promised. He heard a small gasp behind him and realized he hadn't actually mentioned why he needed the stone to the girls. Something he probably should have considered considering it involved Satchel's former god. Oops, well, it's probably fine. Hentath only looked at him with more suspicion though. You're saying Jagal made a request of you to bring a rock into town? Well, to be specific, it was more like a trade with my god. I'm supposed to make a statue of her for the town since she doesn't have any artists or craftsmen to ask. And rather than make it out of the way and risk breaking it while moving it, I figured it's better to work on site. So is there any place in particular you would want it? She still didn't seem convinced, but she led him and Thera to an empty place in the center of the village as Sakhel and Raelia broke away. Well, she probably has some complicated feelings being around her grandmother right now. No harm in her taking a little distance. Thera placed the rock down where Hentath indicated and took a seat, with the older woman going to sit beside her. You both planning on watching? I've got nothing better to do, Thera told him, not even considering checking on Sakhel despite the last 2 weeks working together without any more issues. I need to be sure you're doing as you said since I'm letting you build this in our village. He could only shrug. If you guys are sure. Can't promise how exciting it will be though. Thera, do you think you could grab me a stool while I get started? With a nod she hurried off to Fontesh's home to grab it while he got to work, marking lines to figure out where to cut away rock as he waited and reflecting on what he'd seen from that goddess as she'd posed for him. All of his minds were devoted to making the best statue he could, and as he worked he found the goddess within the stone. Enchanting his tools to deal with the hardness of the stone, he got to work on what he could, breaking away larger chunks to get to what he could, bringing the basic shape out to be seen. He didn't know how long it had taken. He'd gotten lost to time as he worked, but as the sun began to fall and he noticed the world growing dark, he put an end to the task for the day, to be continued the next. Thera had left at some point, but the elder stayed, watching him as he worked and seeming to have grown a sense of serenity as she saw the form of her goddess slowly emerge from the stone. As he put his tools away, ready to stop for the night, she grabbed him. Come with me. Sure, what do you need? Just come on, she said, pulling him along with strength he wouldn't have expected for her age until they were in front of her home. I've got some enchanted tools I wouldn't mind having improved. I assume your offer still stands? Of course, he said, only smiling on the outside but cheering within. Take that. My hard work and positivity win in the end. He let the elder lead him around her home, moving from item to item and doing his best to complete them all. Oh, sweet. It felt like a bonus reward for finally getting the elder to accept his help, and he couldn't be more thrilled to have it done. Don't suppose you could point me to the nearest job change room? Could you? Sure, the city 2 days away. You're kidding. Not every small community like this can have something like that. I'm under the impression they're pretty hard to make. Not so hard that I won't though. Hey Myriad, you listening? Walk me through it. And I was so close to being done for the night. He sighed to himself. Oh well, who needs sleep anyway? All right, unless you need any other enchantments fixed up, I'm going to work on making this place a job crystal. You can't be traveling 2 whole days just to change your jobs. He wished her a good night and started to head out when she stopped him. Hey, before you go, I want to know why you were so insistent on helping out Sakhel. What? Do I need a reason? Humor an old girl. You seemed pretty angry. Is it just because you're the apostle of her new god? Or have you fallen for her charms? She's pretty committed to her snake lady. I don't think you have much of a chance. What? No, there's no charms drawing me in. You don't have to worry about that. Then what got you in such a tiz about it? He thought about brushing it off with some non-answer but decided the truth might go a long way in making things better between them, creating some much-needed perspective on just how not serious changing her faith was. It's not exactly a secret, but do me a favor and keep it to yourself. Your granddaughter and her companions don't know. You heard about the groups that were summoned about a year and a half ago? Well, I'm one of them. I just didn't like hearing you talk to her like that when she's right there wanting to help while I'd kill for the chance to see my family again. Whatever the old woman was expecting, it wasn't that, and he left her in stunned silence. With that, he promised to work on the rest of the house once the statue was complete and went off to work on creating a job crystal. The hard part hadn't been getting the crystal itself. He already knew where a decently sized quartz boulder was from making the resistance amulets out of it, and breaking off a chunk hadn't been too terrible, even if it took a while. No, the hard part was when he got back to Fontesh's home, sitting outside by a fire, slowly chipping away at it as he tried to make a perfect sphere, using one of his minds to learn how to craft the enchantment while forcing the others to devote themselves to making sure the crystal was made correctly the first time. His entire body ached slightly, but he wouldn't forgive himself if he put it off to rest and ended up missing out on some job experience. Even though the quests rewarding him with it were far less exciting than getting a level to a skill, he didn't want to undervalue the benefits permanent growth bonuses provided, and the more he could get, the faster he could potentially grow, which meant he wouldn't be putting it off if he could help it. He stared into the crystal, feeling it was as round as he'd be able to get it with the tools on hand, and began polishing it to make it shine. What do you think? Good enough? It's not so bad. I just wish I had some sun. Anyway, let's get this enchantment started. Trust me, Myriad, of everything I've done tonight, this will be the easy part. He tuned the rest of the world out and focused on creating the enchantment. He had a perfect image of how it was supposed to look in his mind, and since it was made from pure mana, he was on the same playing field as every other enchanter for once, his almost non-existent affinities doing nothing to hold him back. It wasn't set up like any other enchantment he'd made in the past, but that was part of what made it interesting, and left him wanting to dissect the entire thing to try and learn its secrets, but that could wait for another day. He created nodes of mana throughout the crystal, connecting them with the thinnest of threads as he went. He was sure he'd be able to make a much smaller version of the enchantment if he were to do it again, the only issue being it would need a better quality crystal than the common quartz to keep it from breaking, but that was another issue for another day. It was complete, yet felt strangely familiar. Why do I recognize this? I've never even noticed an enchantment in the crystal before. I never looked that hard, and I usually had other things on my mind. I'm telling you, something about its structure feels familiar, like I've seen it before. He did as his god requested, feeling that if it was important it would come to him later, and let all of his options fill his mind. Available jobs: Trap User, Tree Tamer, Craftsman Alchemy Path, Craftsman Artistic Path, Craftsman Blacksmith Path, Craftsman Cooking Path, Craftsman Stonecrafts Path, Craftsman Sewing Path, Heretic, a Mind User, Holy Craftsman, Kin, Tank, a Magic Item Maker. I don't suppose you ever learned what kin is. Did you? He sighed. That's what he'd been worried about. Neither he nor his god were exceptionally dumb. The job had appeared after his little organ transplant had resulted in a new passive skill, one that it was unlikely anyone else in the world possessed. Seeing how the brand new skill resulted in a brand new job, he couldn't help but be a little curious as to how things would change if he took it. Jobs were meant to help a skill grow after all, but his was a skill without level. How exactly did that grow? Even though Myriad knew Ben wouldn't take it, he still warned him off. Relax, I don't plan on going for it for now. I'm just saying, I already have partial demonic body, that's not going to change, and the job itself doesn't sound nefarious or demon-related so long as no one knows what skill it connects to. When you think about everything my new organs do for me, don't you want to see if the job can enhance them at least a bit? Think about keeping your precious apostle alive a while longer. His silence was deafening, and Ben could tell his God wasn't going for it as he put aside the issue for the time being. It wasn't the one he wanted anyway, even if he would be willing to take it in the future to increase his overall survival. So in any case, I got two new options, tank and magic item maker. I understand tank, at least it probably comes from me having defense enhancement, but what about magic item maker? It sounded like it would be linked to either crafting or enchantment, maybe both, but he'd looked into the jobs he could get along those two paths before and he'd never heard of it. That made sense. When he'd taken the time to read up on his potential jobs, he'd basically just skipped over anything with magic as a prerequisite, but that left him with a bit of a dilemma. Ordinarily, enchanting would be considered pretty closely linked to magic jobs since that was the main way of using it. It was more or less expected that a person would go through the apprentice mage path, completing the job and improving both their magic and enchanting at the same time before gaining access to the enchanter job at the second level. Likewise, it was expected that an enchanter would move back to mage jobs and jobs that acted as hybrids of the two before they unlocked high enchanter at the 7th, if they ever made it that far. While craftsman jobs gained experience through enchanting and presumably bonuses to the skill as well, his options there were incredibly limited. Crafting path jobs gained most of their experience from pursuing the path they were related to, meaning he couldn't count on them for enchanting experience, while the other option of holy craftsman he couldn't be sure about. There was a chance it would give bonuses to his enchanting, but it was possible it would only be in specific situations such as creating job crystals. He'd promised to help Thera, but he could justify ignoring those to focus on something else for a little bit because he believed the attempt had potential and he wouldn't be able to benefit his enchanting anyway, but now he had a proper enchanting option available to him. Should he really leave it for later, even if he was sure it wouldn't be too long? I'm still not sure. You know what, you're right, you talked me into it. I'm pretty sure I'll be able to complete the next job in a couple weeks anyway. So what am I even worried about? Myriad thought he heard something absolutely absurd pass through the mind of his apostle, but before he could question him on it, he'd made his choice. Name: Ben Hef. Race: human. Titles: Apostle of Myriad, the Forgotten One, Miracle Maker. Jobs: Mind User, LV6. Previous jobs: Apprentice Craftsman, Craftsman, Priest, Enchanter. Attributes: A Vitality, 169. A Vitality Recovery Rate, 1 per hour. A Mana, 101. Mana Recovery Rate, 6 per minute. Strength, 166. Agility, 85. Stamina, 658. Intelligence, 345. Affinities: Light 3, Life 2. A Fire, 4. Water 3. Air, 4. Earth 2. Death 3. Dark 1. Space, 4. Time 5. Resistances: Light, 68. Life, 72. Fire, 75. Water, 69. Air, 66. Earth, 81. Death, 78. Dark, 85. Space, 63. Time, 61. Blessed skills: Crafting LV6. Enchanting LV5. Focus LV5. Passive skills: World Speak Plus. Tolerance LV2. Sacrilege LV3. Complex Mind LV2. A Bind. Partial Demonic Body. Defense Enhancement LV1. Parallel Thought LV0. Active Skills: Dismantling LV2. Stealth LV1. Connect LV5. Hidden Mind LV4. Calculate LV1. A Knife Wielder LV0. A Hammer Wielder LV0. Blessings: A Myriad's Blessing. Anilia's Blessing. Trials: Trial of Analia and Talona. As exciting as it was to finally acquire a job that not only gave him a skill level but also a brand new skill, he was reeling from the immediate change he felt to his mind. It was like his brain had immediately strengthened, changed almost to the same scale as when he leveled up Complex Mind. Oh Jesus Christ. Myriad, what's going on in my head right now? Things are feeling weird. Okay. But what's actually going on? Wait, so if I grow it with complex mind, I'm already level 6? Definitely part of it. I figured since I don't struggle too much leveling up mind skills, even without any job bonus, I'll be able to level up the ones I have and learn some new ones easily enough. But I also have one other thing to take advantage of. Namely you. I'm in your realm most nights anyway, so I basically have twice the time to work on my skills. Completing it should be a breeze. Might being the keyword. I'm hopeful that improving my ability to think as a whole will help me come up with some solutions I might not have seen before. If I complete this as quickly as I think I will, then even if I'm wrong, it's not a big loss. After a long night of making use of Myriad in his realm to work on his mind skills, he woke up and prepared breakfast for everyone. Over the last few weeks he'd picked up a few recipes from Fontesh, and so he was putting his efforts into making the Frattles de Lair enjoyed that he'd grown quite a taste for himself. With food served and everyone satisfied, he was going to go off to work on the statue again to try and get most, if not all, of it finished that day when Sakhel stopped him, pulling him to the side to make a request. "Let me hire you," she asked, much to Ben's surprise. "Maybe. Why, what do you need?" "We're still stuck on how to deal with the frost bats. Thera suggested that you might be able to make something to help us find them. I'm touched that she has so much faith in me, but I've never made anything for tracking before. I wouldn't know where to start. Actually, how would I go about something like that? Do any affinitied magics have spells that might work? Wait, maybe I could do something with bind? No, either way I'm getting ahead of myself. There's a bigger issue here. Besides, I can't help you. This is your quest. If I do too much, you might not pass it. That's why I said I want to hire you. I spoke it over with Myriad. I would just be paying you for your work. It's no different than hiring someone to make a weapon for me, so long as I'm the one to use it." Well, in that case I guess there's no issue with it, so I'll at least try to see what I can come up with, but I'm not making any promises. We'll discuss price if I manage anything. All right? Sounds good, thanks. He waved her off and went back to work on the statue, his thoughts filled with how he would manage to make an enchantment that could help with tracking. Let's see, I feel like I'm onto something with bind. Since me and Thera can always know where the other is, it's obviously a tracking skill, just highly specialized to a specific person. Maybe there's a way I could alter it to track a specific item? One tracker and one receiver, and just put the receiver on one of the bats. He felt like the idea had potential and stopped his work after a few hours to test it out. The simplest thing he could think of was to make a simple compass of sorts, but instead of using magnetism, he'd be letting bind point the way. To test it, he got a bucket of water and a leftover piece of wood, carving it into a shallow semisphere to float on the water with an arrow carved into the flat side showing the direction of the enchantment before he applied it, trying to work out the structure he thought would work best. Since it came from his copy of Bind, he believed it should point towards Thera, showing him whether or not the idea was viable, and he placed it in the water, hoping it would slowly drift to match the direction he felt her in, only for nothing to happen. Failure, huh? He'd patiently waited a few minutes, but had no success. It wasn't too surprising. Some skills took a lot of time and effort to learn how to properly enchant with, not being anywhere as easy to draw out the effects like using magic or enchanting the effects of the sword wielder skill on a sword. If he was ever back in Analia, he would have to see if any research had been done there, since it was a skill that came from their god. But for the time being he could just experiment. An experiment he did, spending a few hours alternating between working on the statue and trying to make something with bind work, getting Thera near the end to try enchanting with her copy of the skill as well to see if using both made a difference before he had to admit he couldn't do it. He'd have to explore a different option. That put him back to magic. He had his rings, and while the physical magics were likely to be useless to the task, he thought there might be potential in the more spiritually oriented ones, specifically dark magic. "Hey Myriad, you around?" he asked, waiting a few minutes to get a reply. "No, nothing crazy, don't worry. I was just hoping you might have an idea on how to make an enchantment I could use for mind control." "Hey, I'm a sweetheart. Not an evil bone in my body. Everything sounds bad when taken out of context, Mr. God that blew up his planet. I know using mind effects is forbidden on people. What I want to do is create something I could tie a mind effect to that could be placed on a frost bat to motivate them to return to their group. Light magic deals in illusions and dark in hallucinations, but I'd need a better understanding of either to put them to use in an enchantment like that. Maybe I could do something with the first option then. Do you think I might be able to link World Speak Plus to a Frostbat so that it could have enough knowledge of the language that it might obey orders when charmed? Connect. Got it. Considering you seem so against me learning to do this, should you really be so proud of making a skill that makes it easier? Okay, I see what you're saying. It might do well in the shop if I learn how, so I might as well. I guess I should be testing it with a different mind skill first anyway to know if I succeed, rather than start from trying to get World Speak on a bat. Thanks, Myriad. With that done, he went to find himself a test subject and found Sko working on the same task he'd left him with when he stopped needing oil and tar, preparing firewood for the village. While everyone had a magic stove, that didn't mean they could heat their entire homes with it when the temperature dropped. The mana cost would be far too high for something like that, meaning it came down to good old-fashioned fireplaces. Hey, you look like you may need a break from that, he called out cheerfully as he approached the man. He looked at him with something almost akin to fear. Oh, infinite hells, what do you need me to do now? What's with that? I'm not treating him too badly. Yeah, and he's getting to sleep before me and waking up after me, he's fine. Don't be like that. I need to make an enchantment, Sakhel requested. I just need you to use it when I do to see if it works. He still seemed suspicious, but gave in since it was for his teammate. All right. Do you have it on you? Nope, I need to make a helmet first to apply it to, so I want to fit it to your head properly. Take a seat and I'll get started. As with the rest of his time in the village, the materials he could use were limited to basic wood or stone, and with plenty of logs around, the choice of which to use was obvious. He took a thinner log and got to work cutting it to the size he wanted, taking careful work to match it to the dimensions of Sko's head in a way that would be reasonably comfortable as well as secure. Once that was done, he started building an enchantment, not aimed at mind control since he wasn't looking to break any laws, but instead to allow him to use the full effects of complex mind that Ben had access to. By the time he had something he felt happy with, Sko seemed antsy despite getting his desired rest. All right, all that's left is for you to run some of your mana through it to see if it works. And it will do what? Make you think better. Don't worry. Completely unassured, the four-armed man did as he was asked, channeling a bit of his mana through the enchantment, only to double over and barf immediately. What the hell was that? He demanded as soon as he could talk, a question Ben ignored in favor of examining what went wrong. I don't think I did anything that would cause vomiting. Maybe growing two new minds all at once was a bit too disorienting? Let's take it from the top, but this time I'll connect to you as you activate the enchantment to see what's going on. Wait. Hold on. Give me a minute. The man pleaded, but there were still plenty of things to do over the day and he couldn't just wait around. So he placed a hand on the helmet to power it himself while connecting with the man. He wanted to have the tool ready by the night, no matter how much thorough testing that meant. I'm sorry for how I treated you in the past. Please let me help with the hunt and don't leave me alone with him. Thera had just gotten back to the house after discussing what they could try with Sakhel and Raylia in the event Ben couldn't make anything. But as soon as they set foot inside, Sko had immediately prostrated before her, throwing his face into the ground to try to show his sincerity. Ben's trying to improve things for the village as well as make something to help Sakhel. Don't be a baby, she told him coldly, trying to walk past him despite the fact he wasn't giving up. Not only is that guy insane, he's a slave driver. I've gotten the Zeroth level in both woodworking and torsion enhancement because of how much he's made me do. I hadn't even heard of torsion enhancement. That isn't even mentioning whatever he'd been doing to my mind for the last few hours. I guess he has been expecting Sko to keep up with his work pace a bit more than he usually does from other people, but then again, who cares? It's still to help the village and his friend. He can deal. Again, don't be a baby. You must have noticed Ben's worked just as hard for even longer hours. Can the mighty warrior not keep up with the humble craftsman? Even if she knew describing Ben like that was a ridiculous understatement, she really wanted to drive the point home, and while he continued to grovel, Raylia had her own question. Ben, what have you been doing to his mind that has him like this? An excellent question, but nothing much. I needed to make a tool that could interact with the user's thoughts, so I tried creating something that would let him use complex mind. I guess the feeling of constantly growing another mind or two as I fiddled with it was a little disorienting. That's all. Either way, don't worry about it because I was able to make what you'd asked for. Kind of at least. You created a tool that would let us track them, Sakhel asked, eyes sparkling with hope. Again, kind of. He handed over what looked like 5 small quartz cups and began to explain how they worked. Basically, these are mind control helmets with some mental enhancement aspects. If you capture some of the bats and give them simple instructions, they should obey. It needs to be simple to understand, though. I'm basically making words speak plus interact with the concepts that exist in their brains already, so stick to things like go home or come here for best results. Anything more complicated than a few simple words probably won't get through. 2 things to remember is that I haven't had a chance to test them for, well, legal reasons, and also that you'll have to get them to come back to you every now and then to replenish the mana as it drains. You might be able to make the bats fill it themselves, but I wouldn't count on it. While Sakhel was viewing him with respect, seeing a dependable apostle that was able to come through with her challenging request, both Raelia and Sko were looking at him in horror at so easily admitting to creating a mind control enchantment. Thera wasn't overly surprised, given that she'd seen some of the tools he'd created in the past and knew what he was aiming for in the future. But the fact he'd gone from getting the request to completing it so fast was still impressive. She'd thought it would take at least a couple days before he'd come up with a solution. She looked back down to the ground where Sko continued to beg her. If Ben's tool really did work, then they'd probably be led to a large group of them, possibly more than the 3 of them could reasonably handle. If they wanted to get it done quickly, then this was probably the best option. Fine, you can join us for the hunt so long as you don't do anything stupid. So you forgive me? What? No, don't be an idiot. I still don't like you, but it seems like we might need more hands. I'm not going to put myself in danger when I can use you to reduce the risk. It also makes things a bit easier if we need to run away. If he's really sorry, I'm sure he won't mind protecting everyone as we get to safety. Whatever the reason, he was just grateful to be out of Ben's grasp, and Sakhel was happy to have the extra hands before moving on to discuss payment. All right, how much do you want for these? She asked, bracing herself for the worst. There weren't many enchanters that could pull together something like that, especially without any proper tools to place it on, and she was expecting to spend a long while destitute, paying off both this and the money she owed him for getting her released from the pit she was being imprisoned in. But he shocked her with a different offer. Instead of money, how about this? I get one favor from you. I don't have anything in mind right now, but if I ever need help, I get your help. Sound good? Her teammates were off to the side, gesturing wildly not to take the deal, thinking he was the sort of man that would ask something unreasonable and they should just owe him more money instead. But she didn't notice, not giving them a glacé, as she happily agreed with the apostle of the god she had so much faith in. Absolutely. Anything you need. Me and the others will help you with it. Her party visibly deflated as Sakhel promised away not only herself, but them as well. But she didn't notice, instead focusing her full attention to making a plan for what they hoped would be their last hunt. Sakhel had made the plan, leaving the beginning and most important part to Thera. Are you ready? The half-dryad asked her, which she returned with a nod, slipping off her cloak and preparing for however many would come. It always took a few minutes for them to show up, so as they waited she began removing the charm from vast quantities of her dark mana, all in preparation for a single spell. Ever since she acquired the skill, her speed and ability to do so had improved, even if it left her magic useless outside of certain situations like this where she had plenty of time to prepare. But that didn't matter. Any improvement to her magic was improvement overall, and having the ability in her arsenal was proving handy as she felt the spell in her mind take shape. They're coming, Raelia spoke quietly, warning the rest as Thera stretched out her staff. The mana and spell both felt they were going to burst from her, but she did her best to keep it under control. They just needed a few more seconds, just until she got her eyes on the bats to know where to fire. Just a few more seconds, just a little more. She told herself, feeling sweat form on her brow as she did before the first bat came into her line of sight, meaning the others would be close enough that it wouldn't matter. In a feeling of release, no longer suppressing that temperamental mana, she fired it out towards the bats and watched as they fell to the ground, one by one, getting a total of 9 of them with her spell, Sleep. Great work, Sakhel told her encouragingly as she went to each of them, killing 4 while putting the small hats on the rest. giving each a little shake as she did, trying to pull them from their induced rest. It took a bit of waiting, but one by one they all woke up and stared at them, seeming filled with expectations as they did. Sakhel took a breath, knowing that if this didn't work, they'd have to try all over again to come up with a solution as she made her request. Stay close and head home. She'd discussed the matter with her god, who believed that would be the most complex phrase they could understand with the effects of world speak placed on their brains, and held her breath, not daring to hope too hard as she did. There was no need to worry, though. Ben's work paid off. The large bats flew close to the ground and just in front of them, bringing them all up to a jog to follow along as they did, going towards where the others could be found. "This is insane," Raelia muttered. As the one with the best eyesight at night, she was best equipped to judge where they were going and how many they were up against, so she had taken the lead following the bats as hours passed. None of them had expected to find where all of the bats had been coming from close by, but they'd followed for so long that it would only be an hour or two before the sun began to rise before they'd caught sight of their targets. There was a chill in the air as deep in the woods, hundreds of frost bats made their home in the trees, altering the environment to match their desires as they coated everything in a thick layer of frost. Raelia was already shivering and wrapped herself around Sakhel for warmth, as the rest of them tried to figure out how to deal with it. "So if this is where they're coming from, then that means we have to get rid of all of them?" Sko asked in shock. "There's no way, this is too many. We've worked too hard to just give up," Sakhel argued. "Thera, do you think you'll be able to disrupt enough of them that we could stand a chance?" "Maybe, but it looks like Raelia won't be able to fight, and to get the effect you're looking for, my staff won't be able to hold up. Your earth magic's improved, right? We don't need to worry about damaging any of these trees. So do you think you'll be able to use any more spells after?" "Not well. I can use my telekinesis in tandem with my earth magic to fire earth bullets, but it's slow. I wouldn't recommend depending on it. Every bit helps. Besides, I think we can make it work. The light will be up soon, so they should be resting. If we just wait for that, we should be able to catch them all off guard. As long as you disrupt them and are able to do a bit of attacking, me and Sko will handle the rest." While not perfect, it was the best idea they had, and they agreed to wait it out, backing off a little bit to try and let Raelia recover from the cold. Unfortunately, even the best-laid plans don't always work, and this was far from the best of plans. Some passing bats, out and returning to the others, spotted them where they sat and let out a high-pitched shriek, seemingly calling the colony over in a massive drove. The air was thick with the sounds of wings beating, and they needed to spring into action far earlier than they'd expected. Raelia was still freezing but trying to do what she could by taking her beast form, while Sko readied his swords and shields and Sakhel readied her own earth magic, creating blades of dirt to spin above her. Of all of them, Thera took the lead, doing what she'd planned and preparing a life magic spell of massive proportions. She couldn't be sure the entire group was flying towards them, so she needed to make it bigger than she'd initially planned to try and stretch back farther, gathering enough of the life mana within her and forcing it through the small staff that she felt it begin to crack in her hands before the spell was even released, and exerting every bit of control she could manage, forcefully firing it off before it turned to dust in her hand. The outcome of her spell had been more powerful than any she'd used before, and its effect was apparent. While they couldn't be sure they were dead, almost 2/3 of the bats flying their way collapsed to the ground, leaving Sakhel and Sko to handle the rest. Sakhel focused on acting on the ones at a distance, tearing through the swarm with her earthen saw while Sko covered her, attacking any bat that managed to grow too close. They had the advantage for the time being, the bats being thoroughly disoriented by Thera's spell and the immediate loss of so many of their colony. But they couldn't be sure the effects would last, and they had to make the time count. Thera herself deviated from the initial plan slightly, trusting the others to manage as she did. It would be disastrous if the bats she'd taken out were alive and able to get up after some rest, so she did her best to account for that, using her earth magic to raise a cloud of dust over the bodies, the same way she would be able to when her level was low, but with the benefits of her skill having increased so much since then that she was able to bring it down with overwhelming force. The bats on the ground unable to avoid the attack as the forest filled with the sounds of bones snapping. The others, to their credit, kept working at chipping through the numbers as she attempted her attack again, curious if it could be of any use on the ones still flying, but with less success. It looked like she'd gotten a couple, but any that weren't taken down by her first attack had enough mobility to adjust their bodies as they felt the pressure form against it, avoiding the majority of its effect. It was possible she might be able to get a bit more out of that strategy, but for the time being she focused on what she'd agreed to do, creating her oversized earth bullets and throwing them into the approaching mass. It wasn't nearly as quick as what the others were managing with their attacks, but she more than made up for it with volume, taking out tens of them as her boulder sailed through the air. In the heat of battle, it was impossible to know how long they'd been at it, but it was clear exhaustion was setting in. Satchel's attacks were slowing as she tried to conserve mana, and the swings of Sko's swords had been losing power as well, but one of them stopped. The bats were beginning to come to their senses and had been working in tandem on an attack, so slow that none had noticed, but now they were all feeling the effects. The severe chill in the air was a result of the water in it slowly being frozen, a layer of frost forming against all of their equipment as they fought. It had barely been noticeable at first, but as they all lost body heat, flecks of ice began to form on their skin as well. Sko was filling his role as the frontline warrior, doing his best to take the attacks for the mages as the fight went on with his injuries beginning to pile up. Something had to give. Thera, I think I can manage to deal with the frost and keep them attacking for a bit, but I'll be spent. Is there anything you can manage? Sakhel asked, feeling the sting of the ice on her flesh. That depends. Do you mind if your staff is destroyed? Ha, not much of a price if it gets this over with and we all live. Think you can get Ben to make me a new one after? I'll see what I can do. Sakhel let out a chuckle, doing her best to ignore the feeling of the frost seeping into her bones as she threw managing her mana to the wind, instead pulling all of the water in the area to her, completely depriving the bats of their means of wearing them out as she did so and handed the staff to Thera. Removing the frost wasn't warming her up, but at the very least she wasn't getting any colder as she prepared her spell. This wasn't a staff Ben had prepared specifically for her, which meant it wasn't built to resist her magic. Staves like that had always been difficult for her to use, but it was far better than not having one, and she attempted the same thing she'd done before to all of the bats on the ground, but at a much bigger scale, raising thick clouds of dirt and dust into the sky before bringing it crashing down with such force that no bat could reasonably react in time as pebbles and dust ripped through flesh, finally bringing the battle to a close. 201,642,412,544. Why are you making these so freaking hard? It should be 80,631.3636 and so on and so forth forever. I'm not worried. I'm training my mind skills since I have nothing else to do until they all get back. He'd finished the statue of Jagal to the villagers' joy and done all the repairs to the elder's house that he could do, leaving nothing else to work on in the village, so why not train his skills while he waited for them to get back? It wasn't like he was doing it to distract himself from any concern over how late they all were, with a full day almost having passed and the sun about to set. Whatever, just give me some more numbers while I wait, Myriad told him, sounding relieved to be free from hours of math questions. As Ben let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding, rushing over to greet them. They all looked tired and more than a little worse for wear, but they were alive. How'd it go? He asked, hoping for the best given how they looked and getting a positive reaction despite everything. We're pretty sure it's over. Just need to check tomorrow to be sure. Also, is the job crystal you made still in the house? Sakhel asked, seeming to have the most energy of all of them. It is. Hentath knows it's here so the village can figure out what to do with it later. Sweet. Wish me luck, she told them as she rushed up to get her hands on it. All of them followed but Sko, who seemed the most dead on his feet and immediately went to the shed to rest. Fontesh was playing with Delaire in the kitchen, but they put whatever they had been up to on hold as Sakhel came in and placed her hands on the crystal, a smile forming on her lips as she did and signifying that the option she'd been hoping for was there. It took no time at all for the smile to turn into a loud cheer from her as she quickly shared the good news. Tree Tamer just gave me a level to my connect and the skill, spell unification. She happily cheered, and he couldn't help but congratulate her. Spell unification was a skill he'd looked into a bit after getting access to it from Zandale, and if Connect gave her a better chance of awakening her skills into plant magic, then spell unification all but guaranteed it. It was a skill that specifically made it easier for the user to create combined spells so long as they had the correct affinities, meaning that she could start practicing plant spells in earnest. While it would have been possible before, the difficulty and mana cost would be too high to make it practical, but that limit was now significantly reduced so long as she practiced and worked to raise the skill level. Fontesh was the most emotional hearing the news, wrapping her cousin up in a tight hug. Having grown up together in the same village, she knew just how much this meant to Sakhel and couldn't help but be overjoyed for her. To finally be able to use plant magic to any real extent was thrilling, and they would have celebrated in earnest if not for their desperate need for rest. "Well, Hentath," Ben said, tapping his foot as they waited. "Ben, we really don't have to dash." "Nope, you did your part, now she does hers. No getting out of it." Sakhel was embarrassed and tried to talk Ben out of making a big deal of it, but he'd insisted. Hentath had agreed to apologize to her, and he fully expected it to happen. "Ah, you really are a pain," the elder muttered before giving in, attitude becoming far more awkward as she did so. "As for what I said before, it may have been a bit much. This is your home and you're welcome here." Still felt a little weak. "Thank you, grandmother," she said, trying to talk over him. "If the village ever has any problems, please let me know. I'll always come to help. MMH, well, maybe I'll take you up on it if I ever need to. Anyway, with that done, I'm going to borrow your apostle for a bit. Boy, follow me." He wasn't so much asked as told as the elderly woman's vice-like grip locked onto his arm, not letting go as she dragged him into the forest. "Chances I'm about to be murdered?" Noted. He was dragged until they got to the edge of the sacred forest, when he was told in no uncertain terms to wait and that it might be a while as she went within, seeming to search around for the bit that she was still in his field of view. "Not turned into fertilizer yet, so this is probably fine, right?" Ben wasn't really too worried. His god was watching, and he was sure that if Myriad picked up anything from the woman's mind, he would have been warned. He was too cheerful for there to be any problems. In the meantime, he sat down and leaned against one of the trunks. Last time he'd come so far out, he hadn't been allowed to get so close to the woods, but since the elder had brought him here herself, he assumed it was fine and let his curiosity get the better of him. The Dryads were very serious about these trees after all, and seeing as how they'd actually communicate with them through plant magic, he couldn't help being curious about what they had to say. Placing his hand against the trunk of the one he was leaning on, he opened his minds and connected. "Damn!" he accidentally yelled as he broke the connection, pain tearing through his head. "I feel like I just connected to 100 people at once. Damn it, that was intense. I thought my head was about to explode." While the intelligence level seemed to be on the same level as any other plant he interacted with, potentially a little higher, the speed they were able to think was equivalent to any of the races that Ben had connected to. Stranger still, every plant in that section of the forest seemed to be linked, at least the ones that originated from the same world, and Ben was able to connect to all of them at once. Or, I use them for practice while I wait and you just monitor me and get me to stop if it looks like any damage is being done. Rather than answer, he instead connected to the plant again, feeling an uncountable number of minds taking notice of him as he did. It was an unpleasant experience, but not as shocking as when he first connected to it, and he was able to hang on as his brain was bombarded with emotions, and he did his best to respond in kind. "What the hell are you doing?" the Dryad asked as she shook him back to awareness, more concern in her voice than he expected. His head was pounding and he was covered in sweat, but he thought he was mostly all right. Myriad hadn't delivered any desperate warnings at least, though his god definitely didn't like what he was doing even remotely. "Since you left me here, I figured I'd chat with the trees for a bit. They're neat. Never encountered any plants with such active minds before." "Yeah, well, you somehow managed to scare the entire forest. The lot of them were worried that you were dying, saying they could feel your pain." "Ah, I was trying to tell them not to worry. Having so many minds interacting with my own was just a bit intense, but I'm good. I'd love to spend a few more days talking to them if I can." He could only imagine the sort of growth he might be able to get from his mind skills if he did, not to mention how much faster he could complete his current job, but the elder shot him down fast. Absolutely not. I can't have you stressing the forest that much. If I knew you were going to do that, I wouldn't have brought you this far. Anyway, here. She handed him 3 long and sturdy branches that looked like they'd long since fallen from the trees, seeming to be mostly dried out. I'll acknowledge you've done a lot for the village, even if nobody asked you to meddle, so take those as a reward. He looked over the branches he was handed. They were each about as thick as an arm and about as long as he was tall, with a surprising level of sturdiness to them to boot. They'd clearly fallen from their trees long in the past, being light and dry. Oh, cool, thanks. But what can I use them for? He asked as he inspected each one. You're a craftsman, right? Use them to make staves. There's only 2 or 3 trees in the world with wood better for channeling mana than anything from our homeworld, though since I'm giving you 3, make one for my granddaughter as well since she went to the trouble of dealing with our bat problem. Suppose it's only right to reward her for it. As he watched the old woman try to justify her gift to her granddaughter, he couldn't help but give a laugh as he agreed. Seems like things between them might work out, but even more importantly, he'd managed to get his hands on something good. Even if it had taken a while, the trip hadn't been too bad. Please don't go, Dallaire asked, clinging to his leg as he was saying goodbye to her and Fontesh before he and Thera went to catch a ride with the merchant to get back to the gate. Oh man, my heart's going to break. That would mean all the work I did on the statue would be for nothing, so pass. Sakhel snuck behind the young girl and scooped her up in her arms. Come on now. You'll still have me for a little longer at least, so give him a friendly goodbye. All right? But you're not as fun. And you can't cook. Thera let out a small giggle as Fontesh told the child off for being rude. Ben couldn't help but let out a chuckle himself as he went up and patted her head. I'll write you some letters, and if I ever get the chance to stop by again, I will. So be good for your mom, okay? MMH. Okay? She said, still seeming down. Tell you what, I'll send out some better toys than what I was already able to make here. So look forward to it. Really? She asked, eyes lighting up. Really, really, so be good. All right? All right. Ha, thanks for looking after her so much, Fontesh told him as he and Thera boarded the wagon. If you do ever make some time to visit again, I'll be sure to have a room for you. Thanks. I'll take you up on that if I can. If Dallaire has any interest in being a craftsman when she grows up, you can send her my way. She made an excellent helper. I'm sure she has it in her. Ha! Sure, I'll keep the offer in mind. They said goodbye to the rest of the village and finally were on their way back home. It had been longer than either of them had expected, but they'd both gained plenty from the trip. I don't care if you're succeeding. You shouldn't be able to meditate 3 times at once just because you have more minds. It doesn't make sense. Makes sense or not, it's working, so it doesn't matter. Now throw some math at me, Myriad. I want another level to calculate before I'm back. There must be another mind skill we can practice. Just asking you math questions for hours is so freaking boring. You think I'm enjoying it? I don't even need calculate beyond the Zeroth level. This is all to get through the job as fast as I can. If I play my cards right, I might be able to change to a new one in a day or 2 after getting back to Stonewall. Then I'm never touching the skill again. Or at least not until I take another mind job. But that seriously isn't the priority after this one. It better not be, with how much time I'm putting towards helping you train this one, but fine. What's dash his god stopped for a moment, seeming to think before gleefully having a reason to change the topic. Sakhel officially finished her quest and she's asleep, so I'm bringing her up. Your hours of math are going to have to wait. Fine. I guess this is more important. He watched and waited as Myriad brought her there, Sakhel appearing in a cloud of twinkling lights, and he couldn't help but wonder if he always showed up in the same fashion. After a moment her eyes opened, seeing both Ben and Myriad standing before her. While Ben couldn't read her mind without connecting to her like Myriad could, the worried look in her eyes told him she was remembering the last time he'd met her with their god, and Myriad was quick to soothe her. You have nothing to worry about, Sakhel. Just relax. We're here to congratulate you on completing your first quest. As he said that, a colorful light show went up in the background, something the god had arranged ahead of time to properly celebrate her first victory and the job experience that came with it. She hadn't gotten the official confirmation about having completed the quest until after she'd already changed her job. But there was nothing to be done for that. It was hard to plan things out so the job levels would go to the harder ones to acquire, but she seemed thrilled enough with the result. "Thank you so much," she told them proudly, bowing down before them. "You've both done so much for me. If there's ever anything I can do to help the faith as a whole, I'll devote myself to it wholeheartedly." She couldn't have been more pleased with having the opportunity to be of use to the God she'd chosen to follow after everything that happened. Not just the blessing and skill, nor getting a quest and assistance for it along the way. Her longest dream of being able to use plant magic was now a reality. Even if it still wouldn't be as good as someone who properly had the skill, she'd just have to continue to work hard to awaken it as she went and do her best to repay the debt she owed to Myriad for it the entire time. Myriad sensed all of that and couldn't have been happier, feeling confident in his choice. "I fully believe you will. It's actually with that in mind that I brought you here to give you an offer. Sakhel, become my oracle." Watching her, Ben was worried she was about to pass out from the shock. She seemed to be at a complete loss for words as she processed just what she was being offered. I can't," she said, shocking them both before giving an explanation. "This is too big of an honor for me, especially since I've only just started worshiping you. Wouldn't the role be better for one of your older believers?" she asked, not knowing that aside from Ben, she was the oldest believer on the planet. Myriad did his best to talk around that issue as he tried to ease her mind on the matter. "It doesn't matter how long someone has worshipped me. I do my best to watch all of my believers, and I trust in your sincerity. Still, this isn't something I intend to push on you. If you don't want the role, then that is acceptable as well. But I made the offer because I believe you'd be an excellent fit." Hearing all of that, how could she resist? "I'll do it," she told them, voice filled with determination and cheer with small tears of happiness at the corners of her eyes. "It would be the greatest honor I could receive. I promise I won't let you down. I have the utmost faith in you, and I'm free next time something like this happens. Just remember you aren't alone. Should you ever need any help and for whatever reason I can't act immediately, you can always rely on my apostle for assistance as well." Myriad, what the actual hell? Don't just ignore me. I know you can hear this. Sakhel, being none the wiser to Ben cursing the god they both gave their faith so deeply in his mind, bowed down again. "I look forward to doing everything I can to help serve you. I change my mind. This is dumb and embarrassing. What if Sonia comes home early? She'll write about this to my mother and then I'll actually die, Ben. Sorry, but it's too late. I've put way too much work into making this fun, so change into your pajamas, then come help me make the pizza." She groaned but did as she was asked, changing into one of the nightgowns she'd rest in before returning to the kitchen and feeling Ben's eyes on her as he worked on preparing ingredients with his silly cooking outfit. "If you stare, I'm using you to practice my magic all night." "I'm not staring," he told her, raising his hands in self-defense. "You came into the room and I looked at you. Big difference. MMH. She knew she was just feeling self-conscious about doing this when she was an adult, but it was really her own fault. She's the one that brought up the topic when they'd been forced to room together in the Dyrad village, and it seemed like Ben thought it would be fun, so he'd worked hard to create a typical human sleepover for a night he learned that Sonia was taking the overnight shift. While he was used to walking around in his sleepwear in the evening, she was not, typically opting to change in her room before bed. Being about like that made her feel exposed, and somehow it made it worse that Ben really didn't seem too conscious of her in it. "Come on. It will be fun, so don't worry too much and help me decide what toppings to put on the dough." He picked it up and threw it in the air, giving it a few good spins before getting it to the size he wanted. "It's a shame I couldn't get the ingredients to make the same sort of red sauce I did for pasta, but there are no pizza purists in the house. We can throw on whatever sauces and toppings we want. Why are you so pumped about this? And isn't this just a flatbread? Because pizza is delicious, but also maybe. We aren't going to focus on that bit. Come on, it's fun." He began pulling random ingredients from the cold box and sliced them up, adding whatever he thought might be good to half of it. Knowing he was doing all of this because she asked, as well as the fact that he wouldn't give it up, she did her best to put aside her reservations to try to have fun with it, giving in and adding some toppings herself. It seemed to raise his spirits even more to see her getting into it, and he started talking up the meal. You know, on my world, or at least the part of it I'm from, I could always find a pizza place somewhere in a 20-minute walk that would be open for most of the night. It wasn't necessarily always good, but you can't beat the convenience. Wait, we're making this and it won't even be good? Is it too late to switch to something else? Don't get me wrong, it was usually good, and even bad pizza can have its charm. You could call it a party food. For lots of people, it's the go-to for get-togethers, although plenty do it as a weekly meal for their families, as something else if they need a day off from cooking. Alright, I'll admit it's looking good. How long will it take to cook? As long as I don't pass out, no more than 10 minutes. And why would you pass out? It needs to be cooked at a really high heat to get a good crust. Since that means pouring more manna into the oven for the enchantments, it might be cutting it a bit close. But don't worry, I'll stop before I get to that point. She saw the cheer and enthusiasm filling his face and knew he wouldn't be dissuaded. He was plenty used to regulating his mana use for his enchantments at that point anyway, so there was no reason to worry. Still, since he brought it up, she found herself keeping a closer eye on him than she'd planned while waiting for the food to cook. All right, you were right, this is really good, she admitted, going back for another slice. What wasn't there to like? I was basically just bread with some toppings she personally enjoyed. Glad you're enjoying it. In light of that, maybe go a bit easier on me? I am going easy on you. After the food had cooked and they were just waiting for it to cool down a bit, they began a night of board games to entertain themselves, leading to Ben being mercilessly crushed. Maybe go a bit easier then? I don't know how I could. I'm pretty positive this game's luck-based. If it came down to luck, I'd be able to win occasionally. I'm sure there's some complex mechanics behind Go Fish I'm just not getting. She shot him a pitying look before immediately winning the game and moving on to the next one. Even if Ben would ask her to go easy on him, he seemed to have fun no matter how much he lost, just enjoying the act of playing. It also wasn't like he was particularly terrible at any of them. While he had no skill in low mage, he was able to give enough of a challenge in any game from his world he introduced her to make it entertaining no matter how many times she won, though perhaps the victory streak just felt good in and of itself. They chatted as they played, and as the games went on, Thera found herself relaxing more and more, no longer as conscious about the night as when they started. It was fun, and they were just hanging out like they usually did outside of their own work and training. They just stretched it farther into the night than usual. Much farther, actually. She wasn't sure how many hours they'd spent, but she was getting tired and yawning more and more. If you're getting tired, we should move on to the last part of the night. Give me a minute. What? What else did you have planned? Please tell me it's not a pillow fight. I mean, it wasn't, but we can if you want. Could be fun. Let's pass for now. Your loss. Give me a bit to set up then. He ran to his room and came back carrying something that looked large and unwieldy. She couldn't begin to guess what it was supposed to be, but he set it up on the table in front of them before giving power to a light within it, causing it to illuminate the wall in front of them and turning all the others in the house off before sitting down beside her. All right. I have no clue what you could possibly be doing. Ha! I guess that shouldn't be a surprise. It was a lot of work to make, and I'm just one guy, so it's nothing special. But this is something called a projector. Just watch. He reached forward and began turning a crank, only for music to begin playing. She couldn't put her finger on what the style of it was, forced to assume it was something from his world, but it gave off the impression of being upbeat and fun. As far as music boxes went, it seemed nice enough, but she didn't understand the light until it slowly changed as he cranked it, showing simple scenes of a forest and 3 small pink animals building houses within. She watched in surprise and curiosity as the images changed, occasionally being broken up with written text that Ben insisted on reading aloud, doing different voices for each character as he went. It wasn't particularly long, but it was an experience like she'd never had before, and by the end her eyes were sparkling. The light turned off and they were left alone in the dark. So, what did you think? That a story about the value of building things well is right up your alley, she told him with a laugh. Ha, I wasn't thinking about that when I chose it, I swear. It's a pretty famous fairy tale from my homeland. I figured something that could be told quickly like that was the easiest option for my first attempt. I won't go into detail, but the amount of time and effort that went into making something like that was intense. It was hard to balance with my other projects. Well, I think it was worth it. Thanks for taking the time to show me that, Ben. It was incredible. In the dark of the night, they couldn't see the smiles on each other's faces, but the joy Thera got from experiencing something new and interesting like that, paired with Ben's own happiness giving her the experience, left them talking long into the night until they eventually went to sleep. Sonia had come home from a long overnight shift. Her boss had needed to take a break, which meant the duty fell to her until he was back. But it had been a dull one, and she was looking forward to turning into bed for the day. As she got in, she cast a fleeting glance to the living room before doing a double take. A happy smile stretched across her face. Maybe taking the occasional night shift isn't so bad. It certainly creates different opportunities. She thought to herself cheerfully as she went to Thera's room to take the blanket from her bed, before returning to the living room to cover the two peacefully resting against each other on the couch. Hell yes. Look at me go. I'm such a great freaking craftsman, Ben yelled as he pedaled about, not drawing any more stares than he was already getting as he zipped through town on his freshly created bike. It had been 2 months since he got back from the Dryad village, and he hadn't wasted a second of the time. Being able to change his job as fast as he predicted, acquiring the new one, Magic Item Maker, as soon as he returned to Stonewall and working on the numerous projects that captured his interest, having just finished the one he hoped would be most profitable to him. It hadn't been easy either. Creating the frame had been simple enough, but wheels were a whole other issue. As he'd thought, he couldn't simply make wheels out of wood or metal like a carriage might have. It reduced the stability and handling far too much for it to be practical. He thought he was going to be completely stuck without a way to produce rubber. But after days of experimenting to find a solution, his teacher had come in with the save. It turned out there was a similar material on this world. It lacked the bounciness of its earthen counterpart, but it managed to be flexible yet firm and provided the grip he seemed to need his wheels to have. All it took was a little alchemy to extract the material from the plants it could be found in and treat it appropriately, but as soon as that was done it could do the job. He thought that had been the end of it. He created the tires he needed and built his bike. But with the first test ride came an obvious problem. The ride was horribly bumpy, and the bike felt much harder to control than he thought it should. It didn't take much to figure out the issue though, and it was his own fault. He'd cut a corner trying to simplify the construction process. He'd made the wheels solid. He hadn't thought it would be a huge problem. Solid wheels should have had a number of benefits, from not needing to pump then to not having to be as concerned about them breaking, but he had been short-sighted. They existed as they did on Earth for a reason, and at least one of those reasons seemed to be shock absorption. That meant he quite literally had to redesign the wheel, hollowing out the rubber component while creating an airtight membrane to put within, and that wasn't even mentioning the fact that he had to create a pump as well, making one model that would work through hand pumping and another powered through mana and an air magic enchantment. How many long nights had he spent trying to make his travel through the world a little quicker and his wallet a little heavier. And it was finally complete. He was sure there were ways he could improve his design a little, but this was more than enough to get his patent. "Are you sure you don't want to give it a go, Thera?" He called out to her as he did circles up and down the street, doing a wheelie for good measure. "I'm as certain that it takes more skill than you're making it look as I am that I don't have the range of motion," she told him, gesturing to the long cloak that covered her legs. "Well, you may be right about the cloak, but I've made training wheels and everything for getting started out. I'm also an incredibly thoughtful craftsman. Don't forget humble. None are more humble than me," he yelled. He couldn't help it, he was having too much fun. He'd never even been a big cyclist back on Earth, breaking his out only on occasion to ride with his brother, but the fact that he would have never gotten to do it again unless he created the chance with his own skill left him feeling great, almost as great as what happened once he finally stopped. "That's right. Random system notification. I guess I'm also the greatest cycler on the entire planet." His god spoke in his head as Thera commented on what he'd just yelled out. "What? Did you just get riding or something?" "Close, I got cycling and a title. Speaking of, since you're around Myriad, do you know anything about the title skill learner?" He spoke aloud for Thera's sake, knowing she would be curious as well. Wait, really? Has anyone else yet? He gave Ben a minute to feel smug and pass on what he was told to Thera before he continued. What? Then isn't this like the best thing to happen to my status since getting stuck on this world? He asked, excitement leaking out of him. All right. My expectations have been thoroughly put back in check. It's not like there are too many skills I need to personally learn anyway when I have Connect, so you're right, that's definitely the best thing to happen to my status since coming to the planet. Thank you, Myriad, he said aloud, clasping his hands in prayer to appease his god. So what now? Thera asked. Going to rush to the guild and place your patent? I think the guild master will be there for another hour or two. While he could have any of the staff deal with his patents as long as they weren't so potentially world-changing like the braces were, Falk had advised him to deal directly with Cecily for anything he made from his homeworld when he went to get one for the projector he'd made. While he wasn't trying to keep his race a secret, it was undoubtable that word might go around if he explained the type he needed to file to one of the regular counterstaff, and he wasn't sure he wanted to deal with the potential consequences of the entire town knowing. As the guild leader, as well as an acquaintance of both Falk and Sonia, he could trust her to keep everything confidential. Nah, I have an idea I need to work on in the shop, so I'll probably be home a bit late. The leftovers from yesterday should be plenty tasty cold if Sonia isn't back to heat them up. Sounds good. But try not to be too late. You promised to teach me a new card game, and I don't want you sneaking in while I'm asleep to work on my brace. What do you take me for? I'll be back before you're in bed. Don't worry. With that, they parted ways for the time being as he went back into the shop. Thera's not joining you, boy? His teacher asked as he came back in alone. I figured she'd be interested, given what you're making and all. I didn't mention it. Figured it might be a bit of a surprise for when I got home, seeing as how I don't know if it will work anyway. Don't be so negative, the idea has some merit. Having said that, it would probably go better if she was here to actually measure everything. Hey! With how much I work on her enchantment, I can easily make something that will fit her arm perfectly. No need to worry about that. MMH, I guess you do have a decent eye. Let me know if you need a hand. The Yeti told him before returning to his own work. Now alone, Ben spread the materials he'd be using across the table as he looked at some designs he'd sketched and ideas he'd jotted down. He had one goal he was going to dedicate the next few hours to: making Thera a new brace. The idea had come to him out of nowhere, but when it did, he couldn't deny the logic to it. A tool with an enchantment on it needed to be appropriate for the enchantment, or else it would be meaningless. While partial enchantments could let the enchanter skirt this basic rule by taking the attributes of a skill instead of trying to work with it in its totality, an enchanter couldn't just slap a sword wielder skill on a shield and expect any real benefit. In much the same way, the question had occurred to Ben: was the brace he'd first made her truly appropriate for the enchantment? He'd first made her brace when he was only level 3, and now at level 6 he could see all sorts of ways he could improve on it. He now had access to significantly better materials, and as much as he hated to admit it, it probably wasn't even as good as he could have made it at the 3rd level either. Not to say he'd neglected his work or hadn't done the best he could, but he'd rushed. He had wanted to see if his enchantment would work so badly that he was sure the tool he'd made hadn't reached its full potential, a mistake he fully intended to rectify. With all of that in mind, he got to work. Unlike last time, when he'd made an alloy with copper and mithril to help stretch out his materials, this time he would be getting as close to pure mithril as he could manage, adding only a few certain monster bones they had on hand in the shop to increase the overall strength and durability of the metal as he went. Still, that meant going from 50% mithril from the old brace to over 90% in the new one. He had high hopes. He put an unreasonable level of care into doing everything as perfectly as he could, grinding the bones to the perfect consistency, getting them finer than the dust along untouched shelves before sprinkling it across the heated mithril, the temperature of the metal being just enough for him to work it to ensure the least damage to the bone powder he'd produced before the long process of folding and hammering, always making sure to keep the metal at the right temperature while ensuring it all thoroughly blended together. From there, he began shaping it, slowly making it take the form he wanted it to have. The last one he'd made her was lovely, even if he became more and more aware of its flaws with every level up. So he wanted this one to be even more so. Unlike a staff that Thera would destroy after a handful of uses if he wasn't there to fix the sacrificial enchantments on it, this was something she would be wearing for the rest of her life, or at least until she got to a level where she had her charm magic under control. He wanted this to be something she enjoyed wearing, being both aesthetic and comfortable. With that goal set, he'd casually probed her with questions since he'd had the thought, trying to get the best idea he could of what she'd like. While there were plenty of options he'd come up with, there were two he stuck to since he was able to tie them together thematically in a way he thought would look visually pleasing. The first and most surprising came when he got to thinking about just what sort of books she'd read. While most of the ones she read for fun were largely myths and historical fictions in nature, when she described the plots to him or flipped through any himself, he was a little surprised to find that many of them had a strong romance aspect considering her own feelings on the topic. Of course, a lack of interest in real life didn't necessarily translate to no interest in fiction, and given that she worshipped a goddess of love and seduction, it didn't seem too surprising. Which brought the second interest of hers, her faith. Defying his expectations, she actually prayed less than him despite arguably being more devoted, but she would still do it regularly, and all the more since she'd completed her quest. With both of those things in mind, how he'd decorate her brace was clear. He'd gotten 5 rainbow mana crystals, using them instead of the white ones for this brace, and ever so carefully cut them each to the shape of the flower they'd taken from her god's trial, thereby capturing themes of her faith, history, and romance. He couldn't help but pat himself on the back for that idea. He was sure he'd elegantly nailed the symbolism he was hoping for, and took extra care to make sure the shape of each crystal was perfect as he went. He had to get the shape as close to that of the flower as he could since he didn't have its distinct coloration, and he had no plans of covering the mana crystal's unique rainbow shine. Once that was done and each one was perfect, he went on to the final and easiest part, if only by virtue of the fact that he'd prepared it ahead of time. He needed to properly set the mana crystals into the brace to let the future enchantment take advantage of their power, meaning he would need to not only add a channel of Morabugel to the edges of each crystal, but cover the section where both parts met the band with more mithril to secure it, and he fully intended to build upon the visual theme he'd already created with the flower. Knowing in advance he would be trying this, as soon as he had a design in mind, he started shaping strips of mithril into carefully carved snakes, specifically to match the shape of Thera's god, Analia. He carefully wrapped each one around the crystals, and finally he was done. He took a moment to admire his work, knowing in his heart that at his current level there was no possible way to make it better. "Bastard! What's gotcha, yellin' boy?" Falk asked as he rushed to the room. "Oh, sorry, Falk. Didn't realize you were still here. Figured I'd stick around for some of my own work to see how yours turns out. Now out with it, what's the problem?" "No problem. I made the new brace to the absolute best of my ability. Couldn't have done it better if I tried. Then, as soon as it was complete, I leveled up, so I'm stuck wondering if I should remake the thing." "Don't be a fool. You made something leagues ahead of the first one. You might as well see if it actually has any improvement before you waste all that time making something a bit better. Besides, from the looks of it, you managed to get to lower rare before you even put the enchantment on it. No wonder you leveled up. I mean, it was obviously going to be high though, right? Just look at what I used to make it up." At that, his teacher delivered a powerful flick to his head. "You're smarter than that. For her last brace with the enchantment on it, you only got to upper uncommon, and the materials you used this time aren't so much better to make all that difference. A lot of skill went into this, boy. You did fantastic work. Even if she does get another few points off her resistance, don't go melting this down to make a new one. Take my advice and don't try again until you make it to at least the 9th level." He rubbed his head but accepted his teacher's advice gratefully. "All right, I'll keep that in mind. Thanks, Falk." "Bah! It's part of being a teacher, I guess," the Yeti told him with a toothy grin. "Now go on. It's getting late, and I'm betting you'll want to see if it worked as fast as you can." "Oh man, you're right, I should run home," he said, before correcting himself. "Wait, I get to bike home. Catch me squeezing a few more minutes out of the shop from now on." "Like you don't already spend most of the day here," Falk called after him before getting lost in his own thoughts. He couldn't be happier to see his apprentice so dedicated to helping his niece, but even though he knew the boy enjoyed every minute of it, he hoped he would learn to relax a little. When he was an apprentice himself, Falk had always been told he leveled up quickly, but watching the boy fly through his levels was another thing entirely. When he got home, both Thera and Sonia had already eaten, but it looked like Sonia had prepared a simple meal for him, so he dug in as soon as he got back, followed by a few quick rounds of cards. As promised, he taught them both a simple game from his world, namely Old Maid, and got to enjoy a few games of it, being crushed each time. Do I just wear my feelings on my sleeves or something? I think you might just have the worst luck in the world. Is my luck really that bad? He wondered aloud as he thought back to everything that happened since he wound up on the planet. Getting the lowest level skills, being unwanted, almost eaten twice, almost murdered a few times, and just generally beaten up. When he thought about it, he'd dealt with a lot since coming to this world. Wait, what do I mean since coming to this world? I was literally crushed to death on vacation. Hey Myriad, you listening? I don't have bad luck tied to my soul or something. Do I? I guess that's reassuring. They played for a little longer, but eventually Sonia called it quits to get ready for bed. I guess that's as good a time as any to stop, Thera told him. I'll turn in myself so you can work on the enchantment. She wasn't sure what he intended to do since his level hadn't increased at all, but since he had an idea, she wouldn't turn it down. He was trying so hard to help her after all, and she'd grown used to it, at least she thought she had. Great, 'cause with that in mind I have something for you, he told her, before pulling out the new brace and handing it to her. She looked it over, her face growing a deeper shade of gold with each passing second. Thera, you doing okay? Ben, why exactly did you choose this design? Since it's something you're going to wear all of the time, I figured I should try to make it as nice as I can, so I tried to pull together a theme I thought you might like. I figured since your faith is important to you, that was probably a safe bet. And aside from that, since you're into history and romance books, I thought the flower from the trial covered those themes well, while tying it into an alia. Wait, I don't read romances. Some of the books I read just happen to have romance in them. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. So you don't like it? He asked, deflating as he did. He'd really thought he'd created something nice and nailed the theme, but in hindsight it probably would have been a better idea to discuss it with her to figure out what she'd like to wear. I didn't give what she would want enough consideration. Huh? To his relief, though, that didn't seem to be the case. I didn't say that, she told him, not meeting his eyes. It's beautiful, I love it. It's just, even if you were tricked into it, it's covered in a flower you proposed with, each wrapped with a goddess of love. It was just a little unexpected. When she put it that way, it made it a lot easier to notice the more obvious interpretation of the symbolism he was going for, completely ignoring his desire to make something that would speak to her personally, to take on a far more romantic feeling as a gift. Seeing it through that lens, he couldn't help but notice his face getting warm as well. Sorry. I probably should have noticed any other implications compared to what I was going for. It's fine. Like I said, it's beautiful, so I'm happy to wear it. But was there something wrong with my other one? That remains to be seen. I wanted to see if a better quality one would allow the enchantment to display its effects to a greater extent, so I made this. Just got to put on the enchantment to see how it turns out. All right. Give me a few minutes to change. Sure. Don't forget to take off the other brace. As he waited, he called out to his god. Hey Myriad, did you not think to mention any of the implications of the designs I was making when we talked about it? He sighed, knowing that placing any blame on his god was wrong, as he eventually followed Thera to her room, hoping to get his work done as fast as possible, so he could get a few other things complete before they went for their hunt tomorrow. Thera was long used to this at this point, having her arm over her blanket so Ben could take her brace with one hand and her hand with the other before connecting to her. As always, he put up hidden mind between them to keep his thoughts from bothering her while she rested to the best of his abilities. But that didn't stop hers from pouring through, leaving Ben to experience firsthand just how flustered the surprise gift had left her. The intensity of her emotional response was unexpected, but he did his best to push it away from his thoughts, instead focusing on the task at hand. He began the long process of constructing the enchantment on her brace, putting two of his minds to the task while the third was conversing with Myriad to try and continue his lessons on just how his god's people used their magic. It was a subject he'd been focusing on, outside of his lessons from both Quillith and Falk, since he'd first asked while in the Dryad village, and the topic was far more interesting and detailed than he would have expected. While there were many specialized ways to construct an enchantment, such as the method of creating Thera's cloak, there were also a few structured systems in place that were shown to have a fair degree of flexibility for creating different results. One of these ways was the practice he'd taken to of weaving his mana and enchantments together to get specific effects at a reduced mana cost. Given just how low his mana was, it was a method that worked quite well for him personally, not to mention ensured an ease of use for anyone who bought his products. Myriad's system of magic was similar in flexibility, but with a different outcome. Instead of weaving the mana, it was all blended together, as if he was creating alloys of metal or trying to enhance a material. The outcome of this was different from weaving as well. Instead of being able to reduce the mana cost, it actually raised it, but the effects of the main magic that had the others blended into it were so enhanced that the raised cost was worth it. In a way, it reminded him of the combined magics of the world, such as lightning or plant, only without the benefits of a reasonable mana consumption those magics possessed. By blending them in the right way, he could supposedly get a variety of different effects that wouldn't otherwise be seen, but for now he was still focused on just the aspect of enhancing a magic. His god quizzed him as he worked. That depends. Does it get an external fuel source like wood? Or am I powering it entirely through my mana? Alright, let's see. For powering it through my mana alone, I would take the base fire spell and blend it to incorporate both air and water mana, with the water mana having the purpose of drawing in moisture, and the air having the dual purpose of drawing in more air to enhance the flames, as well as working to break down the water drawn into its basic parts, creating more fuel in the process. Well, first I immediately die from the insane mana cost of enhancing the flame. First we can obviously accept what I've already said as still being true, the difference focusing on the aspect of the wood. Since plant magic is done through the use of water, earth, and life mana, I'd assume I'd treat the water within the wood the same way I would the moisture in the air to break it down, while using both earth mana and death mana in tandem to break down the wood, making it easier to burn? Myriad was silent for a moment as he thought on his apostle's lessons. While he hadn't seen too much point in teaching the boy about magic, it proved to be an incredibly rewarding experience. Not only was his race's way of using mana being passed on after so many centuries, but Ben was like a sponge, absorbing the information so well that he was already applying it to his enchantments, and despite all that, it only made Myriad curse the fate that had fallen on his apostle all the more when he came to the world. Even if Ben hadn't come with any blessed magics, if he'd only had the affinities to learn 3 of 4 like an average person did, then there wasn't a doubt in the god's mind the boy could have been a great mage, the sort that would be immensely valuable to the world wherever he was stationed, maybe even leaving his mark on history if he lived long enough. His inquisitive nature was perfect for magic research. It was undoubtable he could have managed something great if he only had the inborn ability to use magic. As things stood, his chances of ever even learning a non-affinitied magic were slim, not having the sort of mana pool that would make taking on the heavy task of learning it a reality. Well, Myriad, I'm waiting, the boy said, drawing the god from his thoughts. With the brace done, Ben discreetly tested the effectiveness of it before Thera woke up, with the results being that the amount of dark resistance someone would need was down to 17 at a distance and 27 on contact, a measly 1 point off both. While it did show that improving the quality of the item was able to increase the power of his enchantment, considering just how much better this brace was compared to the first one, only to get a single point of resistance off, chances were good there wasn't any point in making another unless he could get it to ultra-rare through technique alone, before he applied a single enchantment to it. It was frankly disappointing. He knew it wasn't guaranteed to work, but if it did, he was sure it would have taken at least 3 points off, not just a single one. He knew his ultimate goal of completely suppressing her charm was a slow march to progress, but wasn't this too slow? He sighed and left her room, slinking to his own to work on something to take his mind off his disappointment until Thera woke up, namely tending to his plant, Frederick. His houseplant was looking exceptionally healthy, which shouldn't have been a surprise given the amount of care he put towards it. Since he still practiced his connect with it frequently, he had been able to pick up on various things about it to improve its life, some far less obvious than others, and since he had the time, he focused on the current issue it needed tending to as he snacked on some of its berries, namely repotting it. He'd had to do it once in the past already, and this time he had a larger pot and soil already prepared, having made the pot himself to try and give it a specific role, namely helping his deer plant's growth. While he had been in the Dryad village, he made sure to make a ring with plant magic on it for his use with the help of Fontesh, who had the skill at the 5th level. An interesting problem arose when he came back and showed it to Falk though, learning he'd only been able to copy the skill to the 3rd level, and while he had his theories on why that was the case, there was nothing to be done. At least he could still use it as he intended. In a blatant bout of wastefulness of the magic materials in his possession, he incorporated the smallest amount of mithril he could into making the pot, before tying in a low plant magic enchantment to aid in both the health and growth of his deer plant. As his first constant training partner, he'd grown invested in its well-being, making sure it got nothing but the best for its simple life. His god asked as he watched down on them, "I'm sure it's because I give it so much love and affection." Ben thought positively as he briefly connected with it, feeling it respond in kind. Though not by much, he had noticed the speed of the small plant's thoughts increasing slightly as it grew, giving Ben no end of joy. "Still, I'm surprised you aren't annoyed at all that I'm focusing on this instead of writing out your holy book." "Wait, really? You had plants like this one on your world? What? Does that mean I should go around the forest and pray with some trees for you?" Myriad immediately regretted sharing that as he felt Ben create a mental file in his head, labeling it as potentially abusable info, and pressing his god with a request. "So if you can get faith from Frederick, does that mean you could give it your blessing?" He felt the expectations raise in his believer's mind before he put a stop to it. "Come on, it never hurts to experiment a little. Think of it this way, it's only costly to give a blessing to something that doesn't worship you, right? Since you're already getting faith from it, that shouldn't be too much of a problem. And wouldn't it be interesting to see if it has any effects?" Ben had no reason to want this other than pure curiosity, but he seemed determined to convince his god, just to see what would happen. Myriad sensed this and decided that rather than deal with his believer's pestering, he would compromise. "What? Isn't that a bit much?" He thought about it for a bit. That was definitely more than he'd been expecting to be asked for, but then again he did kind of feel like he owed his god it anyway considering how he twisted the actual quest for it. "Alright, as long as you don't expect it to be quick, I'll do it." Myriad was a little surprised, half expecting the request to get his believer to give up on the matter, but since he didn't, the trade worked out well for him. Deal. With the agreement struck, Myriad did as he was asked, giving the purple houseplant a smaller version of the blessing he gave out to any of his believers. Ben eagerly connected to it again, but the only difference he felt was a small increase in the happiness the plant gave off. While not immediately exciting, it just means that he'd have to watch for anything as time progressed, hoping for some interesting changes as he did. Yeah, give me a minute." He told his god before leaving Frederick to go sit at a small desk with a thick stack of paper already on it. For weeks now he'd been transcribing the words of his god, slowly chipping away at the text when he could to get his current quest done. As easy and straightforward as it was compared to some of his other ones, it was also time-consuming to the extreme, with no way he could think of to cheat it and make it faster. As a result, it was also incredibly boring, and to make up for that he was splitting the time trying to get a different skill he saw that Zandale possessed when the many-tentacled apostle had been in town, one he thought might be handy to him, but not so valuable that he wouldn't just take the time to try and train it himself. With that goal in place, he used one mind to listen to his god and record what he had to say, while the other two were focused on his other hand as he carefully drew picture after picture. With just how much his crafting had leveled up since coming to the world, his art had also improved immensely, letting him capture a level of photorealism he'd never managed on Earth, at least when he was using his dominant hand. The task was pushing his artistic skills and his mind to the limit as he did his best to capture the level of detail he fully knew he was capable of, straining to make each line perfect. A task that could be done without any thought ordinarily becoming an actual challenge, but that just made it more fun. After all, what's the point of life if you don't push yourself a bit? "Hey, I like to keep busy," he thought with a laugh before hearing the notifications going off in his head. The happiness of getting the skill he wanted was briefly blotted out by the feeling of the various strands of thought in his head rearranging themselves and leaving him with a fourth mind. But when things came under control, he was drawing just as well as if he was using what was previously his dominant hand. His god told him as he sighed. When Thera woke up, he prepared a nice breakfast for them before heading to the guild, bringing his bike and the pumps he designed in tow. After explaining the details of the type of patent he'd needed to make last time with the projector, he'd warned her that he was working on something else that would require the same type, and she had told him that as long as he made sure to have all of the details written for her ahead of time, he could just drop in. As he went in and brought everything to the counter, Ankh was there to greet them. "I see you've brought another fun thing today, Ben. Is this what everyone's been talking about seeing you riding on?" A part of him wanted to question how they saw anything without a face but left it at that. "Yeah. Cecily told me I could stop in, so I just wanted to see if it was an okay time to go up. And a quest we should be able to do today, please?" Thera asked after him. They'd already planned to leave their second day off for the week to give them each time to work on other things. And since Ben hadn't bothered sleeping the previous night, it was better for him personally to not be stuck out too late. "Well, let's put the quest on hold for now," Ankh told them both. "The guild master actually requested you both see her the next time you came in, so she'll have time now." Ben found himself mildly worried they'd done something wrong, but to counter that he got the impression Thera was positively thrilled under her cloak, so he assumed she knew something about what was going on. When he arrived at her office, he knocked on the door and heard a loud call to enter. When he did, Cecily looked up from her paperwork to see just who it was. "Ah, perfect timing. I have to say, you're both very convenient to always come for quests on the same day. Makes you easy to expect. Not so much whatever you have with you, though. It's called a bike. It's the thing I told you about last time, as well as a couple maintenance tools I needed to keep the wheels in proper working order. I've got everything written down here, so it shouldn't be too much trouble for you. Having an adventurer that will actually follow instructions is pretty nice, I gotta say," she mused as she looked through his detailed notes, happy to have that part already done. "All that's left is to see it in action to be sure it works like you say." "What, in here? Unless you need more space?" He cast a quick look around the office. It wasn't cluttered and there was a decent amount of space, so he shrugged and hopped on, doing a quick circle before he stopped. "Happy? Very?" The guild leader's eyes were shining as she got up to take a closer look at just what he'd made. "It looks like fun. Mind if I give it a try?" "Sure. But I should warn you it can take some practice." Completely ignoring his advice, she hopped on without hesitation, skillfully doing a few tight laps around the room. Okay, what skills did she already possess that made that so easy for her? "Alright, this thing is fantastic. Are you going to be selling them at Fox Shop?" she questioned. "We're planning on having a few pre-made, but mostly taking special orders. If you're interested, we'll make you one to suit your size. Then I'll have to stop by soon. With that out of the way, though, let's get to the reason I asked you both to join me when you got here." She could see Ben didn't have a clue on his face while Thera stood beside him, almost shaking with excitement. "I'd like to offer you both a rank 4 promotion quest." "Absolutely. Pass. Ben," Thera yelled in exasperation. "What? I'll still help you out if you want to take it. I don't personally want to rank up any more than I already have." Cecily sat and watched their interaction, chuckling as she did. As amusing as it is to see an adventurer who doesn't want to raise their rank, you aren't getting much of a choice. Adventurers aren't given money to hunt just to take care of monsters in the area, you know. The entire system is built around the idea of incentivizing people to get stronger. If you don't actively work to raise your rank, you don't get the rewards. Of course, if you just don't feel like doing a quest for it, there's no issue with that. You can continue doing the regular ones you'd take. It would just mean instead of ranking up immediately, you do it in maybe half a year. MMH. He still wasn't thrilled. He knew ranking up came with responsibility, and he wasn't sure he wanted to deal with it. Unfortunately, on the other hand, he did need to make use of the guild. Their archive was the best place in town to learn about the resources in the area, and it also had books on the various magic branches he would use to study with on occasion, since they were geared more towards the standard ways magic was used in the world, something his god was less familiar with. Don't be so glum about it. Ranking up comes with other perks too. At rank 4 you are officially recognized as a proper adventurer, so the guild helps you out in a variety of ways. In your case, we could arrange to have books sent out here for you at a far lower cost than we could give you as a member of the Craftsman's Guild, though the specific books we could get our hands on would be different and more focused towards adventuring. Aside from that, though, One of the biggest perks is getting to be an adventurer as a job. The issue is I have no interest in this being my job. I'm talking about for your status. Aside from the benefit of all of your skills and aptitudes getting a minor bonus across the board, it's also a class of job similar to soldier or some leadership-type jobs that merges your experience pool with your companions. Is that a good thing? She hesitated briefly, giving it some thought. It depends. If only you two intend to keep partying together alone, then maybe not, but there are a lot of benefits. Adventurer is a job that can specifically gain experience from combat, using magic, or killing monsters, but since it pools your experience, all party members can gain experience the way the others can too. A party only needs a single adventurer to take advantage of this effect after all, so the benefits of this are that if someone with the warrior class was to take it, they'd be able to get experience for their entire party too if they ever needed to use magic. And since killing monsters gives varying experience based on how powerful they are, as long as you hunt regularly, then not only will you finish your job, but you'll be able to get your entire party to finish their jobs quickly too. There are plenty of adventurer parties out there where they try to have one person always with that job until the entire party has taken it. And it sounds like for a full-time craftsman like me, the entire thing would be a slog that would take up my time from pursuing more valuable jobs, he told her dryly, before ultimately giving in. Still, since it doesn't seem like I have a choice, what's the quest? It's actually quite simple. All you have to do is hike through the woods until you get to the city, eliminating any monsters you encounter along the way. It's important to keep the roads safe after all, and it should only take a couple weeks. He couldn't help but groan. That sounded like a pain, and since he'd be walking through the woods to do it, he couldn't even use his bike, the thing he'd specifically made to make travel quicker. He could see Thera in the corner of his eye, giddy with excitement, and knew he wouldn't be able to turn it down. Fine, we'll do it, but it can't be immediately. I need to talk to Falk about this since the shop is my priority. If it comes down to losing access to the archives and losing access to my teacher, I know which choice I'm making. Understandable. There's no rush. Just let me know when you plan to, so I can inform the surrounding towns and villages that will be working to clear the woods at that time. With business done, they left Cecily to their work and left the guild, taking a simple gathering quest as they did. Ben wanting to talk to his teacher beforehand, so if they were taking anything it needed to be easy, and Thera cared far less since she knew she was about to be promoted up a rank. The timing for that works out pretty well actually, Falk mused when Ben got to the shop to explain the situation. Since the time frame you've got to do it is flexible, put it off for 2 months. I've got a meeting with a client in that time that's going to take me at least a month to deal with, so it won't matter if you're busy at the same time. I was planning on letting you know a bit closer to me leaving, but now works just as well. Alright, sounds good to me. Thera? Yeah, I can wait 2 months. I'll let the guild know when we finish our quest. The timing worked out at least. It felt like he had too many distractions from his actual work, so it was nice to hear that he wouldn't be missing out on time he could have spent learning. It did create another problem though, what he would do for the rest of the time that Falk would be away. He was pretty sure they could make it to the city in around 2 weeks of walking, but with the amount of time it would take Falk to get to his meeting and back, he'd have around 3 weeks to do nothing with. Sure, he could just practice as he always had, but a slightly more productive idea managed to pass through his mind. Since we're going to be by the gate anyway, maybe we should stop by Analia? He thought aloud, immediately feeling Thera's good mood drop as a result. UHG, why though? It hasn't even been a year since I've been home. Plus the thought of dealing with my parents again after how they were last time. I just thought if I let your mom know ahead of time, she could gather me some people so I could make some braces. I made a little deal with my god to make him a real church in exchange for a small favor, so boosting my wealth a little would be helpful. Not to mention the fact that I should probably greet the believers he has in the city while wearing the church, score him a bit more faith. My living expenses are currently more than what I'm making in the shop. No matter how well off I am, I want a bit more so I don't need to worry about however expensive building a freaking church ends up being doesn't leave me in a bad place. What do you mean? He asked as he pulled it out, only to feel his eyes bulge as he saw the figure within. Thera and Falk could see his reaction clearly and wanted to know what was going on. He turned his card to them, causing Falk to let out a low whistle and Thera to yell in shock. Where did that all come from? Well, It looks like my patent has started paying off, he sheepishly told the other two. I'd say, his teacher said with a laugh. Let alone a church, may as well have a small castle constructed too. How does someone not notice suddenly having so much money? Thera asked in exasperation. I mean, not to brag, but I was already kind of rich after my first time going there to make all those braces. I haven't had any reason to look at how much was in my account. Unbelievable. But that means we don't need to see my family again, right? Nope. Sonia's already got your mom trying to find some specific skills for me. Remember? Since I have the chance, I'd like to go to their craftsman guild anyway to look into anything else I might ask her to find. I still have a long way to go with your brace after all, and it just so happens your mom would probably be up there as one of the people most looking forward to my success. Thera could only sigh knowing she wouldn't be getting out of a visit home. So what favor did you ask for anyway? Thera asked as they made their way to the woods. Huh. The one that has you making your god a church? It sounds pretty expensive, so I figured it must have been something big. Oh, nothing crazy. I just wanted him to put a blessing on Frederick to see what would happen. Thera stared at him through her hood before giving a long, drawn-out sigh. You know what? I'm not even surprised. That's exactly the sort of ridiculous thing you'd want to do. Electing to ignore his god, he instead focused on Thera. What can I say? It was just a bit of curiosity, and I kind of owe Myriad one after making this anyway, he told her as he gestured to his ever-present coat. Even if its defensive properties left something to be desired, the comfort did not. The perfect temperature control he'd built it to have was immensely satisfying on a warm, sunny day. The fact you did that to begin with is one of the many reasons I'm not even surprised by what you do anymore. He gave her a cheeky smile as they entered the forest and got to work. The task was to gather as many Colotox flowers as they could, an ingredient in some mana regenerations potions, with their reward increasing with the amount they brought back. It was late enough in their life cycle that they had dropped their seeds, meaning all that could be found could be comfortably gathered without affecting the next year's population as they sprung up, and both the guild and Ben wanted to take advantage of that. The flowers were small and green-brown in color, making them hard to find along the forest floor, but the price for them was good, and at this time of year it was a quest a good variety of adventurers would take. With Ben and Thera passing many that had party members on their hands and knees searching the ground as others kept watch, all the while the two of them went deeper into the woods, only stopping every now and then as Ben picked up some he noticed along the way. It only took another 15 minutes till they stopped seeing others for them to get to work in all seriousness, Thera acting to guard Ben as he searched, and Ben simply taking a wide view of the area before he went to grab the flowers and any other plants he thought might be useful to him before they moved on to the next section. As Complex Mind leveled up, this sort of gathering had ended up becoming a specialty of his, as not only did he have more minds to devote to the task, but the small change to how he processed the information he saw in the world grew each time, making it far easier for him to view an area as a whole and spot the many smaller details within, in this case, the flowers they needed. They kept venturing in deeper, Thera eliminating any creature that drew too close with her earth magic, until they had the spatial bag filled after a little more than an hour had passed. Think this will be enough? He asked as he closed it up. I think it would be shocking if anyone else brought back this much. Maybe I should try and get a few mind skills too. Seeing how you managed with an item with complex mind on it, I doubt you'd enjoy it, he told her with a laugh. He'd made a couple items with it attached for the shop, and the majority consensus from any customers that tried it on seemed to be that while it seemed handy, it wasn't worth getting used to. Thera had managed only slightly better than when he'd forced it on Sko. I more meant a normal mind skill, or maybe something like tracking, not whatever weird thing you have permanently happening in your head. I don't care if it's handy, I don't know how you're sane. And you only tried the one with complex mind on it. I wonder what would happen if you tried one with the effects of parallel thought too? I'd be sick, that's what would happen. They continued to chat and joke as they went on their way back to turn in their quest when they heard a noise behind them. Turning quickly and prepared to attack, they both managed to be too slow as Ben was brought to the ground, the weight of whatever it was crushing him. With the air knocked from his lungs, he couldn't get a word out as he had a second to look up at the creature on top of him. Seeing monkey-like features with a body covered in stone plates, before Thera reacted. Firing an earthen spear she'd begun pulling together as soon as they heard a noise and ripping the creature from his body, killing it instantly. "Are you okay?" she asked as she ran over to him, worry filling her voice. "Well, no bites out of me this time, so that's a plus. But that thing weighed a ton. Pretty sure I have a broken rib or two. God, I can't wait until I get defense enhancement a bit higher." He managed to get out between some painful coughs. She cast a quick look around, wanting to be sure there weren't any more of those things as she did before unzipping his coat and directing her life magic to him, trying to heal the unexpected damage from an otherwise safe trip in the woods. He watched her as he laid down, trying to be aware of anything in their surroundings, as well when he felt her mood brighten momentarily from the worry she'd expressed for him before. "Something good?" he asked with a raised eyebrow. "How can you even tell these things? The benefit of this stupid cloak is that I should have some privacy." She joked awkwardly, embarrassed to have been seen through as his injuries were being treated. "My life magic went up and it completed my job." The difference was apparent as her control improved, and eventually he felt good enough to get up, with her transitioning to healing him as they moved. "Didn't you just level up a few months ago? You can't keep saying I'm fast at it if you keep up that pace," he told her as he walked over to see just what had attacked him, at the same time happy for his friend's growth. "PFF, don't compare me to you. I work like a normal person. It's just that now that I'm getting better control over my magic, I can practice more and take advantage of my incredible mana pool. It would be weirder if I didn't start leveling up faster as I got better." "I'm a very normal person," he said in his defense. Arguably the most normal of any human on the planet considering how unreasonably powered up every other one was when they got here. "If I were to go back to Earth, at this point I could probably manage to blend into society." "No, I met your friends, remember? It doesn't matter how strong they were, they're actually normal. Anyway, I think this thing is a stone ape," she told him, directing the conversation back to just what had thrown itself at him. "They have some earth affinity magic they use to lower their weight so they can hide in trees and attack you like they just did, but they're not normally in this region. We'll have to give the guild a quick report. It could mean there's going to be a change to the animal distribution to the forest." "Sounds bad. We can only see how it turns out," she told him with a shrug. "It might become a bit more dangerous, but there's been times in the past that sort of thing has left an area safer too." He could only sigh as they got up to return to the guild, leaving its mangled body and warning any other adventurers they saw along the way. "God, this world is a mess." After they got back to the guild, they explained what happened, showing their cards as proof, before handing over all of the flowers Ben didn't intend to keep for his own use and giving the date they'd take the rank 4 quest. Once that was all complete and money was received, Thera rushed straight to the job change room, placing her hand on the crystal within and feeling giddy as the options filled her mind. Available jobs: Queen of Mana, Musician, Professional Dancer, Bard, Darkness Mage Charm Specialized, Life Mage, Healer, Telekinetic Mage, Dark Mage, a High Earth Mage, Spirit Mage. Seeing the options, she felt positively overjoyed and immediately went to select High Earth Mage, until she noticed the single new one available to her and had to stop, turning to her friend in the process. "Hey Ben, is your god around?" "He is. Got something interesting." The excitement was clear in her voice and it made him all the more curious about the options she'd gotten. "Looks like it. Can you ask him if he's ever heard of the Spirit Mage job?" He spoke in Ben's mind, able to hear the question from Thera as she asked. He passed on what he was told, but Thera only shook her head. "I would have heard about it from my father if that was the case." "Then maybe it's new?" Ben offered. "You are the first half-spirit, right? Maybe it came about because of that or your title." "That's what I'm thinking too, but then my choice just got a lot harder." She still sounded thrilled but tried to calm down to a more thoughtful tone. "New jobs are rare, and they come with the possibility of awakening new skills as well. It could be incredible, maybe something that would be a huge benefit, or it could be nothing. Should I take the chance to see what it gives me, or should I just go with High Earth Mage like I planned?" "In that case, go with what you want more or what you think will be quickest to finish. It's not like the other option won't still be there when you get back. MMH, you aren't wrong. It also made the decision significantly easier. It wasn't hard to be tempted by a new and exciting option, but there was nothing she wanted more than to improve her earth magic. And even if it was an advanced job, it would still presumably be easier to level up compared to one she had no idea how to gain experience in. Name: Thera Oris. Race: Succubus/Spirit Hybrid. Titles: Spirit Child. Jobs: High Earth Mage, LV0. Previous jobs: Beginner Dancer, Dancer, Apprentice Mage, Earth Mage, True Mage. Attributes: A Vitality, 1017. A Vitality Recovery Rate, 11 per hour. Mana, 256,289. Mana Recovery Rate, 32 per minute. Strength, 106. Agility, 356. Stamina, 288. Intelligence, 269. Affinities: A Light, 4. Life, 22. Fire, 11. Water, 14. Air, 12. Earth, 103. Death, 3. Dark, 43. Space, 2. Time, 1. Resistances: A Light, 5. Life, 9. Fire, 11. Water, 16. Air, 12. Earth, 35. Death, 13. Dark, 42. Space, 7. Time, 8. Blessed Skills: Earth Magic, LV6. Charm Magic, LV1. Passive Skills: World Speak Plus. Coordination, LV3. Medical Knowledge, LV1. A Bind. Active Skills: Calculate, LV1. Dance, LV4. String Instrument, LV3. Woodwind Instrument, LV2. Cleaning, LV1. Staff Wielder, LV0. Meditation, LV2. Speed Reading, LV2. Life Magic, LV2. Telekinesis, LV1. Dark Magic, LV0. Blessings: Analia's Blessing. Trials: Trial of Analia and Talona. No skills or level-ups with this one either, it looks like. Was really hoping it would go easy on me and I'd be able to get a level in Earth Magic. Despite saying that she felt quite happy with her choice. With how she'd been improving as she gained more and more control of her power, she knew it would be just a matter of time. The next day Ben went to the shop while Thera focused on training her Earth Magic. There were too many things he wanted to work on and not enough time to do it all, but since this was regularly his day off to hunt anyway, he had the benefit of not needing to help out too much, instead focusing on using the tools around for his own purposes. First and foremost, what he wanted to improve came down to the Church of Myriad itself, his coat. There were a variety of ways he wanted to enchant it to try and improve it now that he'd grown more comfortable with his skills and knowledge, having leveled up a few times since he first made it, with defense being the biggest target to improve. When he first heard that the church would be strengthened by its believers, it seemed he'd overestimated by just how much. Any enhancement it would get would come from the number of believers and years of giving their belief, meaning that for the time being it was still weak, but at least would improve as time went on and more people joined the faith. Still, that also meant he'd have to improve it a bit himself to enhance its effects. With that in mind, he went to his library and pulled out his rings, choosing the perfect ones to suit his needs. Selecting the same armor, shield, and defense enhancement rings he'd used for Thera's brace, as well as sturdy and barrier magic, he slid the rings onto his already crowded fingers as he got to work. The important part was what method he would use to place them. While he was more experienced with weaving his enchantments, the method of blending that Myriad's race used might have been unusually suited for the task, seeing as how it was being put on the church. Both methods had their positives and negatives, but even more important was the fact that he didn't need to choose one or the other, instead taking both to make something greater. The first task was figuring out just how he intended to arrange them and split the skills into two groups. The first would use armor enhancement as its base, since it should be able to be applied to a coat in an almost completely unaltered form given the fact that the skill applied to leather armor as well. To that, though, he had to take the aspects of both shield enhancement and defense enhancement that would be able to complement it and blend them all together. From there, he went to focus on what was left. With barrier magic as the base, he blended it with not only the properties of sturdy, but also his magic resistances, each of them but light and life, just in case he ever needed to be healed while wearing the thing. Once that was done and he had the blended mana created, each filled with the properties they would need to enhance the base one to what he considered its current maximum potential, he stretched them out, weaving them not just with each other and the coat itself, but also with an enchanting spell, Activation Condition. While he hadn't used too many enchanting spells since he gained access to any skill he could get his hands on, this one was arguably the most valuable for an enchanter to learn, making it so that either specific effects or entire enchantments wouldn't activate without cause. In this case, he'd designed the enchantment so that a thin layer of the barrier magic wouldn't deploy around the coat unless the armor enhancement picked up any form of impact, but when it did it would be instantaneous. While hypothetically it might have been better to have it always active if the coat could support the mana cost, if any attack was fast enough to get through before the barrier went up, the enchants would be powerless to stop it anyway and he would likely become a fine red mist. As he was putting on the finishing touches, he was feeling particularly proud as he looked at what he'd created. Such a thing would have been all but impossible if he still only had a single mind available to him, and he couldn't deny the value that came with his mental skills, even if their improvement did tend to make his thoughts feel crowded. To push his mind to the limit, arranging skills and their aspects, blending what he needed and weaving it all into something functional, he couldn't have imagined something better as his new and improved coat was completed. "Oh, I am having such a good week," he muttered to himself with a smile before calling out to his god. "Hey Myriad, what do you think? I'm making you a new one, it's fine," he told his god before running off to his teacher. "Hey Fawk, I made some improvements, what do you think?" The Yeti took it, looking it over in his hands. "I gotta say, this technique your god's teaching you is something. Might have to try and incorporate some of it in my own work. The enchantment's good. If you ever get the chance to remake it with even just 4th or 5th level skills, then I don't think you'd have too much to worry about while you wear it. Of course, your face and legs are still pretty exposed. True, I'll work on that a bit too. Most of the skills are ones Sonia's asked Pelania to try and get for me anyway, so hopefully she has some good news. And if I'm going to be in Analia anyway, I might as well pick up a higher copy of Barrier Magic." "Ha! Then I'll keep my eye out for whatever you make when you come back," Fawk said before getting back to his own work. I really should try to think of a way to keep my exposed bits a bit more protected. I could probably make some pants out of a good enough material to be able to hold their enchantments without breaking, but the mana cost is a whole other issue. That isn't even mentioning my head. There was always something. Some other project to work on, some challenge to overcome, and deciding which would be next was never easy. But there was no real rush, and as much fun as it would be to focus on crafting a new and exciting item or creating a better enchantment, he decided to his next task of the day to focus on something a little more humble, but at the same time having the potential to revolutionize his work. He was going to solve his mana problem. He wanted to keep creating bigger and better enchantments, but the issue came down to powering them after. While he was already seeing great advances to his total mana pool as a result of sleeping with the mana-sucking ring he'd made, it wasn't enough to do anything truly great, meaning he'd need to rely on either slowly filling items with mana that had been made from materials that could store it well with minimal loss, or use magic materials that would continue to suck mana from the environment to use. The first option would be significantly cheaper to produce, though Ben didn't exactly need to be concerned about that now that his patent was paying off, though the second option had its problems too. Magic materials weren't easy to find on the public market, and even though he was directly connected to the people in control of that supply, he worried his crafting as a whole would suffer if he tried to brute force his creations using expensive items all of the time instead of finding different solutions to his work. With that in mind, he thought he'd found the most elegant of solutions, taking inspiration from his home world. The creation of a battery. Well, he was pretty sure it wouldn't technically qualify as a battery, but he didn't know what other name to call it. The idea was simple: get a small piece of a white or rainbow mana crystal, probably shaping it to be about the size and shape of a AAA for convenience as well as consistency, and setting it properly so that mana within would be extracted. From there, instead of permanently binding it to the tool like mana crystals typically were, he'd create a divot within the ones he was making where it could be inserted. While this wasn't the sort of thing he could sell in the shop, the materials making it far outside the price range of their typical clientele, it was the perfect solution for his personal use, and one he planned on exploring immediately, the only question becoming just what to make to test it with. His first idea was for an additional shield. Even though he'd just improved the cloak, all the enchantments he added to it were just to keep him from getting injured. Its immediate weakness was that it wasn't anchored, so while he may not get harmed if another stone ape threw itself at him, he wouldn't be able to avoid being knocked to the ground, where it might be able to start going for his less defended face. To do what he had in mind, though, he'd need to use a pretty high-quality material to keep it small and easy to use, so he immediately started digging around the storage room, seeing just what he could find. It didn't take too long to gather some materials he thought could get the job done, grabbing some good quality steel as well as the exoskeletons of a couple mine beetles, creatures that naturally possessed empathy magic and used it in their hunting. While it wasn't the same as the barrier magic he planned to use for his enchantment, the fact that they were both non-affinitied in nature meant that he'd be able to have an easier time adding his enchantment to the entire thing without having to worry about the material breaking. With that selected, he got to work grinding the beetle remains, cleaning it as he went of any dried-out innards before adding it to the heated steel, working the materials until he was sure they were smoothly blended together. From there came the shape the item would take. It needed to be something he could conveniently carry around. In his bag would be all right, but in a pocket would be more ideal, making it easier to be something he could just pull out and use immediately if he needed to. But then what to make? He considered a cube, built in such a way that it would disassemble itself once activated and box him in for protection, with each piece acting as a corner as a barrier emerged to form walls between them. But as much as the mental visual made it appealing, it left him with far too many moving parts and failure points. So I want one solid object, something that would be able to give me a fair bit of protection. A shield could potentially work then. I could build the enchantment to act the same as when I had my barrier gauntlet extending outwards, but I think that would only be able to protect me from a single direction. I'd still be completely vulnerable to anything coming from the sides or above. So where does that leave me? Unless maybe a ring? He wasn't thinking of making anything like the sort of ring his fingers were covered in. While they could technically act as catalysts to deploy mana through to fire off attacks and create spells, that was a one-way ticket to mana exhaustion if he tried. What he was considering was more of a cross between a bracelet and a hula hoop, something he could wear on his arm, but when needed he could drop on the ground to encircle him, raising a barrier around him as he did so into a dome-like shape. The very top where his head was at would admittedly be a weak point, but not to the extent that he would need to really worry. Feeling the most viable option by far, he immediately got to work shaping the metal and crafting the pieces to act in the way he saw them moving in his mind. The end product wouldn't be small, it would actually cover most of the forearm that wore it. With a little extra work he could use that to his advantage as well, adding a secondary barrier enchantment to it to act in a similar way as his gauntlet had before he lost it during his battle with the demon horde. It took some tinkering, but when he was done he had a helix-like band that would take the shape of a large circle he could comfortably stand in when he dropped it to the ground. All that was left was applying the enchantment. For that, he used the same rings as when he had added the enchantment to the coat as well as his resistances, but all aspects were blended into the base barrier enchantment. It upped the mana cost a fair bit, and once he was done he wasn't positive he'd be able to power it with one of his newly made white mana batteries. So he used a rainbow one to be on the safe side for the first test. Placing his freshly made tool on he activated it, watching with his mana sense as it all activated properly, the power from his battery pouring into the enchantments and creating a nearly transparent but powerful shield on his arm. Canceling the enchantment he moved on to the next test, dropping the band and watching it as it uncurled around him, a powerful barrier immediately forming as he did. The enchantment was designed to not only deploy the barrier to protect him, but also cling to the ground digging into it as it went off to keep it in place. He pressed his hands on the barrier, feeling it holding firm and felt the confidence to throw himself against it, making sure a strong blow wouldn't tip it over. He felt everything stay in place, and while that didn't mean it couldn't be knocked down by something with more energy than his body weight, it was a good starting sign. Everything's looking good so far, now to just, damn. A small flaw, one he hadn't paid much mind to, suddenly reared its ugly head. The barrier deployed from the inside rim of the ring, while the battery was on the outside, meaning not only could he not remove it to cancel the enchantment, he couldn't destroy the enchantment either to free himself. Well, this is going to be embarrassing, he muttered to himself before calling out in a much louder voice, "Hey fuck, I need a bit of help back here." Once his teacher finally stopped laughing, he took out the battery and the barrier came down. "Boy, I gotta say, it's never a dull moment with you, is it?" The Yeti chuckled as he wiped a tear from his eye. "The design is good, and the battery, as you call it, is a smart way to make use of a mana stone. When you're in Analia, you should show it to Pelania. I'm sure she'd see the value. Having said all that, I'm sure you know where you need to improve on this without me spelling it out, right? Make the barrier rise from the outside of the ring instead of the inside, and remake the tool so that the battery is on the inner ring," Ben said with a sigh, embarrassed to have made such a simple mistake. "Good man. Don't go letting it get to you too much. Every crafter has a mistake or two to look back on, happens to the best of us." Having said that though, another way you could improve on the design of your enchantment would be to make it so things can pass through the side you're in, while any attacks at you could be guarded against like you currently have it. You aren't wrong, but the barrier magic I have is too low level to do something like that. Once I'm back in Analia, I'll grab it at level 6 and I should be able to make that possible though. Level 6? His teacher asked with a raise of an eyebrow. "You go up again?" "When I made the enchantment on the coat." "Crazy brat, take a break if you need to. Isn't this supposed to be your day off anyway?" "It is. That's why today's dedicated to working on stuff exclusively for me instead of the shop. Gods above, when you work yourself to death, a lot of fingers are going to be pointed my way. Anyone that knows me will vouch for you, you'll be fine," he said, waving off his teacher's concerns as they both got back to work. There were plenty of hours left in the day and he still had things to make. Namely, a weapon. He was none too fond of how often he found himself in a dangerous situation where his options of fighting back were limited, but he also didn't want to take the time to train up a combat skill like the knife or hammer wielder ones he currently possessed. It simply wasn't how he wanted to devote his time to grow, meaning that he would need to make something that would combine destructive power with ease of use, and he didn't need to just make one. His first immediate thought would be both wasteful and pricey, but perfect for maximum destructive power when in the event of an emergency, at least until his god shot the idea down. Came the shout in his mind. Does that mean it's possible? Ben personally didn't see any issues. He'd only be using a small amount if he did, and the idea was just to craft an enchantment the same way Myriad had quizzed him about creating a powerful fire, just to a greater extreme. If he could convert all of the mana stored into crystal into an explosion spell instantaneously, then he didn't doubt he could get quite the effect. Honestly, hearing all of this kinda makes me want to try even more. Relax, if you think it's such a bad idea then I won't. There's plenty of other options anyway. For example, a knife could potentially be made to be extremely powerful without the need to master his skill. And since they were simple to carry around on top of the fact that he was already fairly competent with them thanks to the combination of knife wielder and the basic tool proficiency that came with his crafting, it felt like a safe bet. The main issue was how to make it. When he considered just how many potential effects he could place on one, it just brought out his creative spirit, making him want to stress a knife to the limit of its function. But first that meant creating the best one he could. As much as he'd want to make it the same way he had Will's gauntlets, he didn't trust himself to not immediately mess up and get himself killed by touching the blade without thinking. Unlike his friends, who had the sort of vitality and recovery rates that meant they'd probably be able to walk such a mistake off, for Ben the risk was far more life-threatening. Instead, he went with steel once again, not selecting the materials he would incorporate into it until he was sure of the enchantments he would want. Sturdy and drain were the obvious choices, and he was sure he could enhance both aspects by blending in the different types of mana he could produce from the rings. But he didn't want to stop there either. While those would be excellent on a knife by themselves, he wanted more than excellent. He wanted to create something devastating, and he felt ideas take shape in his head for just how he would go about it. On top of the previously named earth and death spells, he intended to add spells of the fire, water, dark, and time affinities. He knew he could make the fire and water affinity spells synergize well, using fire to heat the blade to a downright ridiculous degree, while water would be used to lower the boiling point of the liquid around it, causing overwhelming devastation to anything unfortunate enough to be on the wrong end of it, while dark would aim to spread a mental effect throughout the body so long as the knife was lodged in it, namely pain suppression. The idea was that anything cut or stabbed by the knife might not be as worried as they otherwise should if they didn't immediately feel the pain of an attack, letting the blade do damage for even longer. The final spell that would bring it all together as something that nobody would want to be on the wrong end of was a time enhancement one, speeding up the time for the blade and anything it contacted, meaning he'd be able to make all the damage it could already inflict even more potent. He knew it was going to be complicated, maybe even too complicated, as he was pulling the ideas together and started writing them down as he went, sketching the shape the enchantments would need to be made in for his hypothetical blade, while at the same time figuring out the finer details, how each spell would be blended with other ones to enhance the overall effect, which ones would be woven together and which wouldn't, all the while trying to figure out if there was anything else he could do. "It just feels like something is missing," he muttered to himself as he stared down at the design he'd made. "Maybe, but a healer, huh? Healer. I feel like there's an idea there," he pondered aloud before yelling out, "Wait! Healing suppression. The final effect to tie it all together. I can use the Death Affinity spell as a base while blending in some light and life magic to complement it. Myriad, you're the best." All that was left was making the knife itself. Looking at the design he had for his enchantment, he would be using every affinity of magic but space. A small part of him wanted to find a way to include it for completeness' sake, but he pushed that back. He could always try and make another later on, and the more important issue was deciding just what materials to add to the steel for the best effect, and in what quantity. He jotted down more notes, figuring out the ratios that he thought would be best before taking it to Falk, hoping to get his work checked before he committed to it. The enchantments were complex enough that if he made any mistakes he was sure the knife would shatter, so it was best to be sure it would work. He pulled his teacher from the flail he was building when it looked like it wouldn't be too inconvenient and handed over his notes. "What do you think? Any chance of this working? Boy, what exactly are you trying to kill with something like this?" Anything I need to, I guess." "Well, if anything gets within stabbing range, it looks like it won't be hard. As for if it has any chance, what's your current level in crafting?" 7. MMH, up the amount of nightmare bone you plan on using by about 1% and it might be possible. Big emphasis on might. Frankly, if you hadn't only just leveled up both your skills, I'd think you were attempting this to get you to the next level. Something like this is going to walk the fine line between mid and upper rare, and I can't say which side it will fall on. No need to tease me with some good news, Falk. I'm already going to make it. Hearing his teacher say that did bring his enthusiasm through the roof, though. All it came down to was if he'd succeed. Leaving his teacher and going back to his forge, he got to work, heating up the steel while he started on grinding out more than a dozen varieties of bone, measuring out the quantities he would need before carefully adding them to the metal with as much patience as when he'd done upon making Thera's new brace until the final product was perfect. From there he worked the metal, shaping it until he had a blade that would be almost as long as his forearm if he ignored the handle. With a space in the grip, he could put his mana battery to power it. With that, the knife itself was complete. It felt comfortable in his hand as he gave it a few good swings to feel it glide through the air before he moved on to the part that would make or break his project, the enchantment itself. With so many parts to it, he knew he would be pushing himself to his mental limit, even with the benefits of all of his mines, and that wasn't even considering his mana. With so many things to do, all of them dealing with affinities he couldn't wield, he was going to have to take it extra slow, just to be sure he didn't pass out partway through. He got to work, blending and shaping, feeling every bit of his enchantment as it came together in his hands as the time ticked by, leaving him feeling the sort of mental strain that was so rare for him as his mind skills improved. Every bit of him was dedicated to the task at hand, and as he was finally complete, enchantments built into a cohesive whole, the blade turned to dust in his hands. His god told him sympathetically, What are you talking about, Myriad? If it doesn't work the first time, then I just need to try again." He gave himself a minute to relax before he did just that, having some water and feeling the pounding in his head subside before he got back to it, only to fail again. Not deterred, he went back to the storage and tried again and again and again after that. He knew he could do it, it was right on the edge of what was possible for his current level of skill, but it just wasn't coming together. He decided to make this attempt the last for the day. It was getting late, and if he couldn't manage it this time, then he would sleep on it and hope that things would go better the next. Taking a deep breath, he cleared his mind of all of his thoughts and got to work. Myriad stayed silent, seeing the determination in the mind of his apostle as Falk waited to the side. not wanting to distract his student as he put every bit of himself into his task. Mana was shaped as stretched, every bit of it bending to his will as he pushed himself to make it work. Each strand of enchantment placed with a level of delicacy and precision that he knew he was incapable of doing better if he had to. Feeling deep in his core that it didn't matter how much he believed in himself, if it didn't work this time then it was beyond his abilities. And as he laid the final bit down he waited with bated breath, prepared for the entire thing to shatter to dust in his hand. But it never did. Potentially the deadliest item he'd ever made was complete, and it was beautiful. "Hey Thera!" yelled the overly enthusiastic green girl as she ran up to her in the training grounds, drawing the few other eyes around as she did and leaving Thera to groan internally. Despite her better judgment, she was going to be spending the day practicing her magic with Sakhel, with that plan being one of the reasons she and Ben hadn't gone on a 2-day excursion into the woods for their weekend quest. It seemed the half-dryad was committed to her goal of making a better relationship with her, and in that vein had rushed to arrange a time they could work on their skills together when they had a chance. Not that that had been easier either. Unlike Ben, Sakhel didn't bother keeping the fact that she was now the oracle of a god to herself, something that earned her more than a little curiosity from the townspeople when the majority had never encountered one before, and left her exceptionally busy spreading the word of Myriad when she'd gotten back. Now that things had died down a bit, though, she'd managed to make the time to all but beg Thera for the chance to try and get to know one another better. "Were you waiting long? I could have met you at your house. I wanted to start early so it's fine. Now that you're here, what do you actually want to do? We're going to practice, right? How about catch?" she asked as she pulled a small ball of dirt from the ground with her magic and gently lobbed it at Thera, whose response was to step out of the way. "Even if my control has gotten better, I still can't manage something of that size. Unless you're up to try playing catch with something like this?" Thera responded, ripping a mound of dirt the size of a beach ball into the air, and was about to gently toss it to the side of the girl when she thought better of it, letting it fall to the ground. That might be a bit much for me. Unfortunately, that's as small as I can go. I told you when you asked, didn't I? You lean to control and I tip pretty heavily towards power. Any practice together wouldn't really benefit either of us compared to just working alone. What about life magic? We both have that. Why don't we practice together? How exactly are you planning to do that? I mean, I guess I could break Sko's knee again and we could rush to see which of us could repair it faster. But I'm going to assume you remember how I was fighting for your village? I wouldn't recommend it unless you want to find a new warrior for your party. Well, what about? Sakhel desperately thought but got nowhere, and Thera could see the girl struggle, unable to think of anything to do, so she decided to throw her a lifeline despite her desire to just practice by herself. "How about something like this? We see if you can hit me with one of your dirt balls and I'll try to stop you with my own. There's not many monsters in the area that do any ranged attacks, so it could be some good practice." "Sounds great," she agreed readily as her energy came back. "In that case, here I come." Both women jumped back from each other, making space for their magic as they went. Satchel immediately got into it, pulling a ball of dirt from the ground and throwing it at Thera without releasing it from her magical grasp to make it so she could stop it in the event things started looking dangerous. But Thera was prepared, and rather than do something as simple as throw up a wall of dirt to block it, she decided to push herself a bit more, creating the same larger ball of dirt she had before and moving it into the path of Satchel's attack, both blocking it and absorbing it into the mass of her own. The move caught her off guard, but also brought out her competitive spirit, and she was quick to raise another, throwing it towards Thera in earnest while trying to direct it out of the path of the bigger mass as she quickly responded, consuming the smaller lump into her growing sphere. Back and forth they continued for a while as the day slowly passed, and a small part of Thera had to admit to herself she was having some fun. She'd never been able to treat using magic as a game before, and even if she did have a few close calls, Sakhel had the skill to keep her from getting injured. As the time wore on, the ball of earth Thera used only grew larger until she was managing something as big across as a person was tall, and she was prepared to put an end to their little game as Sakhel prepared one final move, trying to outspeed her to bring her down from behind. Thera wasn't sure if she'd be able to manage it, but she put her best effort in, shedding the mass her magic had gained so she could rapidly bring it around behind her, only for her staff to finally shatter to dust in her hands as she did so, losing control of her spell while at the same time being knocked over by Satchels, who'd never predicted such a turn of events. "I'm so sorry," she called out as she ran over, fearing the worst. It had seemed like they'd gotten a good rhythm going and had been having fun, and she was praying she hadn't just ruined it. Thankfully, Thera was understanding enough. "Don't worry about it. I should have paid more attention to how long I'd been using the staff. I thought I'd be able to get a bit more time out of this one, but I guess I went a bit harder on it than I'd thought." "Oh, good," she said, filled with relief. "Still, it must be troubling to go through so many staves. Just how much mana do you have?" "A lot. Anyway, it's not so bad now that I'm a bit better with my magic, and Ben's learned some tricks to increase their durability, but it would be nice to not have to worry during my hunts." Saying that, she couldn't help but eye the wooden one Ben had made Sakhel from a fallen branch in her village's sacred forest. Unlike the ones she got, which were plain metal rods, he'd taken a bit more time to flex his creative chops on hers, giving it a smooth, ornate shape with subtle plant carvings throughout its length to decorate it. It was almost surprising he could make such a finely crafted staff considering the hundreds he'd seen made for her by this point. But she understood where he was coming from. She needed function before form. There was no reason for him to go out of his way to make something that was so aesthetic if it would turn to dust in a matter of days after being made. "Anyway," Satchel started, pulling her from her thoughts. "Want to get something to eat since we're done? It'll be my treat." She had intended to end things when they finished practicing, but the prospect of food was an appealing one when she considered just how many hours there would be till either Ben or her aunt were able to cook dinner. Meaning until then, her options were either to accept this or just snack on whatever fruits or vegetables were at home and ready to eat. "Well, since you're offering, I guess I can. I know it's not ideal, Thera, but it would really be helping out both me and the clinic if you stop by for just a couple hours a day." Ben overheard Sonia telling Thera as he got home. "I'm not entirely against the idea, Auntie. I just don't think it will go well. Do you really not have any alternative?" "I wouldn't have asked if I did. It will just be a little while as we look for new hands, please." "Oh, all right. I guess I can do this for you for at least a bit." "Am I missing something exciting?" he asked as he entered the kitchen, just in time to see the two of them finish their meal. "Unfortunately, we just lost another member of the clinic," Sonia explained while greeting him. "Finding anyone to fill the spots with so many nations beginning to recruit healers for their armies is proving a challenge. But luckily Thera agreed to help out a bit. Anyway, you're pretty late today, Ben. Anything interesting happen?" "I leveled up my enchanting again and was able to make something good." "Speaking of, Thera, I'll need to update your enchantment tonight again." She still looked uncomfortable at the prospect of acting as a town healer, but hearing that brightened her mood. Every level up he got to enchanting was a reasonable bump to how much of her charm could be blocked after all. The issue was that after this update to it, he'd no longer be able to depend on the effects of his resistances to make his enchantment for her stronger, instead being forced to rely on whatever skills he could find to tie into and enhance its effects. He'd still need to try to blend the ones he already knew would work, but decided to wait until he had higher-level versions of the skill since he could expect results to be far more pronounced when he did. "Sure. We can start when you're done dinner if you'd like." "Works for me." "Also, Ben, do you mind if I ask you a favor?" Sonia requested as he grabbed himself a bowl of food. Sure, of course, what do you need?" It was rare for her to ask anything of him like that, but he had no issue as long as it was possible. "Since Thera's going to be helping out, could you prepare an amulet for the clinic? One with both dark and life resistances? Since I haven't needed to do any corrections to the life magic she uses on you recently, I think your resistance level at her current skill ensures it's safe." "Is that all?" "Yeah, that's fine. Stop by the shop tomorrow to pick it up. I'll make sure it's done first thing." "All right, thank you. So anyway, what did you make that was so good?" At that he went on to talk about his day before asking about theirs in turn, learning about how Thera's practice with Sakhel went, as well as Sonia's time at the clinic, before devoting some more time to redoing the enchantment on Thera's bracelet into the night and getting a bit of sleep. In the day that followed, he woke up early and left breakfast at the table for the two women before biking to the shop and immediately making Thera the amulet. only to have time to focus on some more personal projects until the store actually opened for the day. He first created a sheath for the knife, tying in a spatial enchantment that could tap into some of the power in the knife's battery, so that the entire thing could comfortably fit into his pocket without him having to worry before he moved on to the next task he'd set for himself. While he now had 2 fairly well-made defensive items, as well as 1 melee weapon, he still had one more thing he wanted for completing his defensive arsenal to leave him slightly less worried about meeting his untimely demise for the second time. A ranged weapon. When he'd tried before to make a gun, he was stopped by the differing materials in the world and his weaker knowledge of how to make use of them, but now things were different. Along with a great level of knowledge and experience, he also had better materials and his skills in enchanting, leaving him to stop waiting for whatever development Quilithus people were hoping for to once again try crafting one with his own 2 hands. He sketched a rough outline before getting to work, with his goal being to construct a revolver. While a part of him thought to try for a musket first, thinking it would be simpler overall, he wanted something that would be easy to carry on top of the fact that he didn't want to have to reload every time. While he might get less power out of it and only 6 shots, he wanted to trust that Thera would be able to cover things after that. With his idea firmly in his mind, he got to work, creating the handle first, followed by the cylinder for the bullets, making sure each slot was the same consistent size. With that done, he focused on constructing the barrel, doing his best to add the rifling he'd heard that gave bullets their spin to improve their accuracy, and immediately exhausted everything he knew about guns. They simply hadn't been of much interest to him back on Earth. He didn't have the obsession with them the way a few others he knew seemed to, and everything he did know stemmed from a combination of documentaries and other media that he was praying had given him at least semi-accurate info. Of course, given how many changes he'd be making, hopefully that wouldn't matter too much. Since he still didn't know how to make anything like gunpowder, his weapon was going to be entirely powered by one of his batteries placed into the handle to activate the enchantments he'd be placing on it, and with that goal set he got to work assembling it to the best of his abilities, compensating for the areas he was less sure of with the skills he'd been working so hard to master. Once that was done, he focused on the enchantments, strengthening each area he thought might need it before moving on to the main one that would allow the tool to work as intended. Creating a fire enchantment to release a small but powerful explosion between it and the bullet, he linked it to the trigger for the activation condition, and from there the weapon itself was complete, a small mold to create the bullets being the finishing touches to make it truly functional. "Managed to pull together something interesting, boy?" his teacher asked as Ben sighed in contentment, leaving him aware of his presence. "Potentially, I need to see how well it will work with some testing, but it's based on a weapon from my homeworld with a bit of a magic flair. The main issue is I'm not too familiar with them, so I had to compensate a fair bit as I did." He'd planned on seeing how well he'd done with it when he finished for the day, but it seemed his teacher's curiosity was piqued. After all, it wasn't too often that the smith got to see something completely new related to his field of work. "Why not test it out now? We aren't exactly busy this early." I guess it should be fine here. In that case, give me a few to make up a target." He got a long plank of wood and drew a large target on it before placing it against some metal as he did, thinking that would be enough to stop the bullet if it completely passed through the wood, and stood back to take aim. He was fairly certain he was breaking more than a few rules on gun safety, but he stood about 10 feet back from his target, took aim, and fired. It was quieter than he'd expected, all things considered, and chalked it up to the fact that the projectile was being shot off with magic instead of gunpowder. The bigger issue was that he missed the target. Thankfully, he still hit the surrounding wood, but it wasn't the best of starts. Still, he went up to check its penetrating power. The results were adequate. While it didn't hit the metal backing, he could see it peeking through the back of the plank, meaning that for something as dense as wood he got about an inch of penetration. On the one hand, that meant he could probably expect reasonable success against more fleshy enemies, but on the other, he probably still needed to fear anything like the stone ape or anyone like him with a defense enhancement skill. "It's all right, I guess," his teacher told him, sounding a touch disappointed, "but I think you'd get better results from something like a standard bow. I'll probably experiment with a few different potential enchantments later to see if I can boost its power, but the point is that this has a low barrier to entry. I don't need strength or training to get any good results out of this. I just need to be able to aim." "Wow, my aim is shockingly bad. Much, much worse." When he finished work for the day, He went to the training grounds with his target to practice away from the city without worry, only to find the limits of his skill. While after a few shots he found himself able to get the target somewhat reliably at 10 feet. Anything past 20 he would miss without question. That wasn't even considering the fact that he needed time to properly aim beforehand, meaning it wouldn't have much use if he was on the wrong end of a surprise attack, though he did feel like he'd be fine if he were to give it some limited use while hunting. Still, it wouldn't be the all-powerful tool he'd hoped. "I may have underestimated the amount of work it took to get good at something like this," he said with a groan. "Still, I think I can at least apply some of the principles I've learned making it to other projects." "Oh my God. Why was that so expensive?" "Hey, your believers just need to go in to pray, it's fine. The rest is completely necessary storage space. God, so much. Pretty much all of the money I'm going to be making while in Analia is going towards books. I need to grab as many as I can on materials, enchanting, crafting techniques, alchemic theory, pretty much all I can find on both the standard magics as well as both specialized and combined magics. Oh, and any book on skills I can get my hands on. I can't do that. What if someone borrows a book when I need it?" Myriad could only groan at his apostle's stubbornness. "It's on the to-do list. Maybe when I eventually take Fractured Mind User for some easy job experience. Until then, my reading speed is already pretty intense with my many minds." With the land bought for the church and a construction team now contracted for actually creating the designs he'd made for it, he just managed to spend more wealth than he'd ever expected to, considering he wasn't taken in by any nation, but he still had plenty left despite that, with more accumulating thanks to the work of the various enchanters throughout the world that shared his God. With money not an issue and his promise to his God on its way to being complete by the time he got back, he couldn't help but feel he was in a good place for his rapidly approaching quest. "Bad day at the clinic?" Ben asked as he got home for the day, finding Thera face down on the couch, seeming to be completely drained of energy. In the weeks since she started, she'd been devoting about half of each day to helping out, the owner being agreeable about it since they were short-staffed overall and the fact he was already acquainted with Thera, having let her help out with some cleaning in the past. She'd been rather committed to properly splitting her time between that in the morning with her afternoons being devoted to her earth magic. But it looked like all of that had started to catch up with her. "Everyone in town sucks," she moaned, tired of the people she'd been dealing with in her day-to-day life at the clinic. "I just want to start our quest already. It's only a few days away. For now, why not tell me what happened this time?" "A kid broke his arm, and when I went to treat it, he started crying his eyes out. I guess unlike the adults I've dealt with, kids aren't so willing to trust when the other healers say it will be fine." "Oof, yeah, that's rough. Try thinking of it this way, though. It's only a few more days till we leave. Hopefully by the time we're back, the clinic will be fully staffed again. Easy for you to say. You're not stuck seeing the looks people give me when I go to treat them. People don't like placing their trust in amulets." Even if the town had grown to accept Thera to a much greater extent than in the past, there was still enough lingering fear to shy from her touch, it seemed, and Ben could only imagine how emotionally draining dealing with that for a few hours a day could be. He sat down beside her and rubbed her head, trying to be reassuring as he did. "You're right, that does suck. Here, what do you want for dinner? I'll make you something nice to cheer you up." "Okay. MH, how about something new?" she asked, peeking out from where she laid with an upturned glance. "Something new, huh? That should be doable. Come on. I'll need some ingredients, so let's go shopping." The promise of something tasty brought back her spirits, and she got up to go at his request, making their way to the town's butcher as Ben tried to raise her mood. They'd managed to use up all of the meat Ben gathered during their demon hunt a while ago, and they both agreed they typically preferred getting it from in town when they could. The flavor that came with whatever beast they might find could be rather hit or miss. "Ah, Ben, how'd you like the roast Galvik you got last week?" The butcher, a large muscular lizard man, called out as they entered. "It was great," he responded with as much cheer in return. "I was hoping you might have something that matches the flavor I'm looking for. Something salty and a fair bit of fat if you have it, and I'd get it diced." "I think I have just the thing. Making something fancy? That's the goal. I'll bring the recipe by next time. I need something if it works out." "Sounds good. The kids loved the last one you gave me. They chatted a while longer while he prepared the meat before Ben paid and they parted ways. I have no clue how you managed that so well, Thera sighed as they left. Managed what? People. He gets his knives sharpened at the shop is all. The longer you do some work at the clinic, the more others will get used to you. You're fine with Ankh at the guild, right? Plus you and Sakhel seem to be spending more time together. Ankh's been fine from the beginning, it's different. And Sakhel is just trying to make up for the past. It was obvious that he wasn't doing a good job convincing her. But even if he thought she'd feel a bit better after some rest, he kept trying and took her hand. Well, you've got me, so if there's anything I can do, let me know. I don't like seeing my best friend sad. I'm your best friend? She asked, perking up. Yeah, obviously. Like, behind Will and Steph? Neither of them were even my best friend on Earth. They're good friends, but I think the person I spend every day with is going to take the spot over people I'm only exchanging letters with about once a month. The next one on the planet is probably Myriad. Although he's not really on the planet, is he? He thought aloud, getting a small chuckle from her. Well, thanks. Even if you are embarrassingly open about your feelings. It's part of my appeal. If I don't let people know I care, then I might regret it later. And dinner is served. Eat it while it's hot. What did you say this was called? She asked with hesitation as she saw the lump-filled sauce in front of her. Gnocchi cacio e pepe, lovingly made without a single ingredient that it should be in a dish that would already make an Italian want to stab me. She didn't know what she'd been expecting when she'd asked for something new, but it hadn't been this. And with a bit of hesitation she scooped some up and took a bite as her eyes lit up and she immediately went for another. It's good. Of course it is. Everything I make tastes good, he told her confidently, hiding the fact that he'd been worried about whether or not it would come together the way it was supposed to and feeling relieved it had worked out. Making a note, next time Thera wants a surprise cheer-up meal, pick something easier. After food, they spent some time playing a few games before going to sleep. Sonia was stuck late at work, so it had been just the two of them, leaving Thera on a winning streak without any real competition. All right, I'll make it hearts and it looks like I win. Good game. But if your last card is an 8 and there's nobody else playing, you don't need to make it anything. I guess that makes sense. As he stared at her smiling face, he couldn't help but be pleased to have brightened her mood, even as he began to come to a realization the longer he looked at her. Gently cupping her face in his hands and surprising her as he did. He stared intently at her as he spoke. I really have put this off a bit longer than I should have, haven't I? Ben? What are you talking about? She asked, face growing golden as he got closer. I really need to give you that haircut. He'd put off creating Thera's new staff for long enough. His crafting level was far higher than he'd initially planned for it to be, and with them about to embark on a long trek to hunt anything they could find along the way, a good quality staff was a must. It was with all of that in mind that he finally sat her down in front of him and pulled out a sharp pair of scissors. Are you sure you can do this? She asked, sounding nervous as she did. We can always wait until we get to Analia so my mom can do it. I mean, it's your hair. If you'd prefer that, then we can wait. MMH. She had a brief but intense internal debate trying to decide what was more important, the chance for a good staff or the chance for a bad haircut, and though it was close, her desire to have a staff that wouldn't break one out in the end. All right, go ahead. It's not like anyone will see it if you mess up anyway. I'm not going to mess up, so don't worry, he told her, trying to calm her down. At the very least, I'm confident that I won't do anything that would make you look terrible. If it needs a little bit of fixing up after then, your mom can manage. As he said that, he started running his fingers through her hair, looking at the way it naturally wanted to fall along her head as he tried to figure out where would be the best way to cut it as he did, before taking the plunge and making the first snip. After he did that, the rest became far easier as he treated it like any other project and let himself get lost in it. It didn't take long before he was done, having cut it to be just above her shoulders. He looked it over carefully and was personally quite happy with how it turned out. Everything was even and he hadn't left her with a bald spot, so he was sure she'd be satisfied, and feeling like getting a little creative, he started to style it a bit next. Aren't you done? I'm just doing a quick braid. It will look nice, don't worry. The kind he was putting in her hair, a half-up crown braid, was quick and easy enough. And once he was finished and had everything in place, he grabbed a mirror to show off the result. "So what do you think?" he asked, feeling pretty good about it. "It's nice. I don't really do anything like this since I'm always in my cloak. But I like it. How do you even know how to do this sort of thing?" "When I was a kid, I liked to braid bracelets and stuff. And since I was pretty good at it, my mom thought it would be fun to teach me how to do her hair, so I learned a few different ones. It's easy enough. I can show you how sometime if you want." I'll think about it. It's not something I can see myself doing honestly, but it might be nice to learn." "Well, I guess I can always just do it for you instead if you ever want to fancy up a bit. Just let me know. Anyway, with that done, I guess I'll head out to work on your staff, so swing by the shop in the morning." "Ben, it's late. The rest of the town has already shut down for the day," she told him incredulously. "I can wait till tomorrow to get it, and you need to actually sleep more than a couple of hours a night." He could see she wasn't going to back down on forcing him to take care of himself, and with a bit of hesitation, he gave in. "It is kind of important that I get this right the first time. Getting a bit of extra sleep won't hurt." He woke up in the morning, ready to make a simple breakfast for Thera and Sonia to enjoy when they got up, only to find Thera already awake. It seemed the exciting prospect of a better staff had made it hard to stay asleep, so with more energy than she knew what to do with, she decided to go watch him make it. He didn't mind the company, it being a nice alternative to the few hours he'd typically spend alone so early in the morning as they went to the shop and he got started. He'd been planning this for a while, and an idea was firmly developed in his head. Unlike the majority of the staves he'd made her, this one wouldn't be metal in its nature, at least not to the extent it normally was. Instead, he would be taking advantage of the wood he'd received from the Dryads, shaping one of the two remaining branches he'd received into a more proper shape, cutting and sanding away the rougher, more natural look of the wood to create something smoother and more pleasant to handle. While it didn't look overly impressive for the time being, though, that wouldn't be true when it was done. With the basic shape formed, he carefully drilled a thin hole through its core, stretching from the bottom to almost the tip of the staff, stopping just before he'd get through the top. At the head of the staff, he carefully inserted a variety of thin yet sturdy pins, creating minuscule holes he planned to put to use later, and with the most delicate parts of the woodworking complete, moved on to cutting channels up the length of the staff, creating an intersecting quadruple helix as he went to be filled in after. Finally, the time came to use the golden hair, possibly the toughest material to determine the proper way to work with. From earlier tests, he confirmed the properties that seemed apparent to him. When removed from her head, it still acted as one would expect hair would, minus the fact that it could be melted down to turn into regular gold. Since he couldn't determine if doing so would destroy the properties he'd wanted to preserve, that meant working it in an almost unaltered state, and that was exactly what he did. With all but a few strands, he twisted them, before binding them to a sturdy silver wire and sliding it within the core of the staff, getting it exactly where he wanted it to be as he moved on to the next part, carefully sliding the few remaining hairs into the pinholes he'd created, letting the strands meet the central core before he secured them the best he could before moving to the forge to heat up 3 different metals, one of which he'd be needing shortly. To properly take advantage of it, though, he needed to apply an earthen enchantment to what he currently had, blending it with water mana to more successfully achieve the effect he wanted. Once that was done, the metal was ready, and he had to quickly make a separate tool to keep things from getting too dangerous. Getting a thin plate of metal, he quickly shaped it so it could act as a funnel and wrapped it around the bottom of the staff before securing it upright and carefully taking a crucible of molten silver, pouring it into the core to ensure everything was secured in place while providing power to the enchantments at the same time, the effect of which was to increase the speed the liquid metal would run as it made its way down until he saw it begin to dribble out of the end of the staff, and he removed his enchantments. He looked it over from there. The wood hadn't been too damaged by the entire process, though if the quality of Dryad wood weren't so great, he would have had to find a different means to secure it. At worst, it had gotten a mild char on the interior, nothing more. Satisfied the hardest part was complete, he moved on to the remaining 2 metals, Morbusel and iron, and finding both at the right temperature to work, began blending the two together, carefully running his mana through the superheated mix as he did so. His goal wasn't as simple as the usual outward release of any of the mana it sucked. He was aiming to direct it at a right angle. When he was sure it was as good as he could make it and fearing mana exhaustion, he took it away, cutting it into strips and shaping it while it was still hot to get it perfect, before fitting each piece into the channels he'd cut along the length of the staff and securing them in place. Carefully looking it over, he couldn't have been more pleased. The dark wood complemented the rosy metal wrapped around it and let the golden flecks at the top shine. For the finishing touches, he wrapped some leather cords around where he knew Thera would be gripping it, so she wouldn't feel any effect of having her mana drained, regardless of how insignificant that would be for her. Followed up with a complex arrangement of his highest possible resistances throughout the entire thing, and he could finally say it was complete. Thera didn't notice Ben's eyes light up with the notification. It seemed her own were glued to the staff he'd made. But in the hours since he started on it, Falk had shown up, and he was a bit more observant of his pupil. "Got some good news, I take it, boy? Don't tell me your skills leveled up again after only a few months since the last time." "Nope. Finished my job. Speaking of, mind if I take a few hours off to change it and test this out with Thera?" She turned to her uncle. Even with her face covered, it was clear she was filled with hope and expectations, and he waved them off. "Sure. There's not too much to do today anyway since we're both so close to heading off, so enjoy. Come back and let me know how it works out," Myriad told him as he walked to the job room with Thera in tow. "What? I didn't even do anything for once. And you're mad about that, why?" "Myriad, I like you, but if you're saying I don't put in effort, then we're throwing hands when I get to sleep." "Actually, no? How common is it?" "Come on, that can't be right." "Sure, it's a lot of work and effort, but I'm managing fine." "What did they say when you told them about how awesome I am then?" "What? You did tell them about how great your beloved apostle is, didn't you?" "Man, why not? I'm over here working my butt off. I want the praise. Maybe a new title too, depending on what they have to say." "Okay, ignoring the opinion you have of your incredibly dear and devoted apostle who's working to get you a church made in town, I guess that does sound like a pain in the ass. Hate to be on Falk's side about this, but I have no interest in being a teacher when I'm still growing myself." Sure, he'd put the offer out to Delaire and her mother when he'd left, but what were actually the chances of him needing to do such a thing by the time she was old enough to make up her mind about what she'd want to do with her life? Odds were best she'd work on tending to their forest like the rest of her village. Shaking off their talk, he got to the guild and entered the job room, placing his hand on the crystal and letting the options fill his mind. Available jobs: Trap User, Tree Tamer, Craftsman Alchemy Path, Craftsman Artistic Path, Craftsman Blacksmith Path, Craftsman Cooking Path, Craftsman Stonecrafts Path, Craftsman Sewing Path, Heretic, Holy Craftsman, Kin, Tank, a Mathematician, Fractured Mind User, a Magic Weapon Maker. So only one new one, it looks like. Both Mathematician and Fractured Mind User had appeared after completing the Mind User job, and while the second one sounded appealing as one he might be able to finish in a few months the same way he had completed the first one in a matter of weeks, he left it to the side for the time being as he considered his options, the task becoming much easier with the appearance of the new job. As much as it was a shame that he wasn't a level 7 enchanter yet to get access to the one he really wanted, it looked like the benefits of taking Magic Item Maker previously had just reared its head, giving him a new avenue to focus on his crafting and enchanting. Name: Ben Hef. Race: human. Titles: Apostle of Myriad, the Forgotten One, Miracle Maker, Skill Learner. Jobs: Magic Weapon Maker, LV1. Previous jobs: Apprentice Craftsman, Craftsman, Priest, Enchanter, Mind User, Magic Item Maker. Attributes: A Vitality, 183. A Vitality Recovery Rate, 2 per hour. Mana, 120. Mana Recovery Rate, 7 per minute. Strength, 186. Agility, 85. Stamina, 689. Intelligence, 379. Affinities: Light 3, Life 2, Fire 4, Water 3, Air 4, Earth 2, Death 3, Dark 1, Space 4, Time 5. Resistances: Light 68, Life 72, Fire 75. Water, 69. Air, 66. Earth, 81. Death, 78. Dark, 85. Space, 63. Time, 61. Blessed skills. Crafting LV7. Enchanting LV6. Focus LV6. Passive skills. World Speak Plus. Tolerance LV2. Sacrilege LV3. Complex Mind LV3. A Bind. Partial Demonic Body. Defense Enhancement LV1. Parallel Thought LV1. Ambidexterity. Active Skills. Dismantling LV3. Stealth LV1. Connect LV6. Hidden Mind LV4. Calculate LV3. A Knife Wielder LV0. A Hammer Wielder LV0. Meditation LV1. Cycling LV0. Blessings. A Myriad's Blessing. Anilia's Blessing. Trials. Trial of Analia and Talona. So the bonuses are the same for Magic Item Maker. Huh? He'd suspected as much, but it was still a turn of events he was quite pleased with. Even if it was his only one, enchanting did qualify as a magic skill, and since it also fell under crafting as well, he harbored a small, secret hope that it meant it was drawing dual bonuses from the single job. It wasn't something he could be certain about without finding someone with an awakened analysis skill, but even if he was wrong, it didn't matter too much. Any job that let him get bonuses to it was a benefit. All that mattered was how he would work through the experience for it, especially when he had a few weeks he'd be stuck in the woods, without a forge to make weapons for the job experience. If only I could bring the entire forge to the woods, he thought to himself before an idea struck him. Wait, maybe I don't need to? I'll have to do some testing to see what nets me job experience. Are you all done? Thera asked, seeing he'd finished with both the crystal and his card. Yep, you're looking at a magic weapon maker now. In that case, come on, I want to try this out. Her excitement was palpable, and he couldn't help but muse that if it did work, the drop in his staff production might end up as a loss to his current job experience as they headed out into the training grounds. With his new job selected, they both made their way to the training grounds, eager to see what sort of success the new staff would have. It was probably the finest one he'd ever made and loaded to the brim with sacrificial enchantments to boot. Once they arrived and Thera stood ready to cast, he stood to the side and watched intensely. His mana sense had long since improved over how it had been during his first time in Analia, transitioning from just feeling the enchantments on items he touched to seeing them faintly the same way he could with those of a god, and he eagerly watched as Thera fired her first spell, an earth bullet. Looking good so far, not a single enchantment broke, he called out. Go a little crazy with it. I'll stop you if it looks like it's starting to take any damage. With that bit of encouragement, she let herself go wild, throwing a variety of earth bullets at a range of sizes, creating earthen spears from the ground and directing them through the air, and pulling off the same giant earth saws she'd done during the trial. It was only when she attempted an earth wave like she'd done, while facing off against a horde of monsters, that Ben stepped in, placing his hand on the staff to repair a few of the enchantments that had been broken. It looks like it was only at that last one that the enchantments started to break, he told her with a grin that stretched from ear to ear. As long as I'm around then, doing more mana-intense stuff like that is fine, but even if I'm not, I don't think it will be too much of a problem for you, he said, casting a look around the training grounds and feeling infinitely grateful that the area existed with the intent of being destroyed. All that's left is to try it with your other types of magic to see if it can stand up to those. All right, I'll try to use telekinesis next, and then maybe use it in tandem with my earth magic, so let me know how it looks. Took a bit longer, but visually it would seem like she hadn't changed. She was still moving the earth in much the same way she'd been before. The only difference was that each spell took a significantly increased rate of time to pull off as she did. Ben kept watch from the side and gave his approval that there were no issues yet, and that was when she switched to combining its effects with her earth magic, immediately increasing the mass she could move and the power she could get from each attack as she did so, with the only cost once again being her spell activation speed. He let her fire for a bit longer before stopping her again. Alright, one of the enchantments just broke, so it looks like the more you combine your magic like that, the more strain it will take on. But from what I'm seeing, the speed is slow. As long as you bring me your staff at the end of each day, I should be able to repair whatever few get damaged. But from what I'm seeing, I'm not too worried. For now, we should probably go back and test your earth magic spells for a few hours later to be sure that nothing starts breaking down. But for the time being, let's switch to your other magics. She tried out her life magic next, focusing on the same sort of attack she'd used to deal with the frost bats and let out an unrestrained amount of mana. Seeing no issues with that, they ignored any of the regular healing spells she knew. Using them already pushed her control and ability to lower the amount of mana she released. There was no concern about that potentially damaging her staff compared to everything else she'd done. All that left was the last option, her dark magic. She didn't do too much with it for fear it would bring up the level of her charm as well. But she'd taken the time to read up on a few different spells for it anyway, just in case she'd ever need it, and tried to decide on which one to try before ultimately sticking to the dark fog her Aunt Funa had recommended to her. She carefully gathered her dark mana, stripping the charm from it, and shaped her spell while holding onto as much as she could. With her overall magic control having improved so much, she was able to hang onto a significant amount more than the first time and released her spell. It was like night had fallen. They could both see each other, but that was as much an effect of being close by as it was their high dark resistances. It was only lucky that nobody else was using the area to practice their skills when they did, so they didn't need to worry about any accidents. Well, I don't see any breakage in the enchantment, so as long as you don't go too crazy with anything, I'd say you have a working staff. As happy as he was to have finally solved one of her problems, Thera was all the more so and completely giddy with joy as she spent the rest of the day practicing her magic to an extent she'd never managed before. After months of work, Myriad had told Ben every detail that was to make it to his holy book. From guidelines to tales of himself and the deeds of his people that had left their mark on the faith. He'd spared no effort in ensuring it would be perfect, which was why it was all the more stressful that his apostle put his pen down before the final sentence. All right, cool. Well then, I'll get that last bit down when I'm a bit closer to the end of my job. Yeah, but if I actually cross it now, then I'll be getting the job experience when I literally just started this one. I'd rather save those levels for when I'm a little farther in. Look, I know this is important to you and I'm not a complete jerk. I'll write the final sentence and hand it in just before I return. Okay? I want to get at least a good chunk of job levels in before I finish this. I've got a pretty good strategy to keep the entire trip from being a waste experience-wise, so give me just a little trust here, man. You waited centuries for this, right? What's a few more weeks if it keeps your dear apostle alive? Why, Myriad? Do I ever do anything but my absolute best?